Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if issei go to adventure with older women's in harem with all part 2. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the DanzyDanz for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. Let's start this video. Hired issei, age 20, never thought he would get a whole ing house at that age. Complete with the essential furniture. Well, he never thought he'd bump into a careless fallen angel and discover the entire existence of the supernatural world, all because he left his water bottle in the class, either. Not that he ever thought he would bump into a literal devil who was severely wounded during the middle of a heavy rain. He seemed to bump into many weird things as of late. Maybe he should start believing a bit more so he wouldn't just stumble into even stranger things. Things like 3 small dogs with white fur who were actually one collective demon in disguise. But that shouldn't be possible. Then again, he got a house. For free. It came out of nowhere. Well, not exactly nowhere. The house had been pulled out of the Gregory's budget, and had been written off as business expense for the sake of lowering their income tax. How did it jump from an apartment to a 2-story unassuming Japanese house, you might ask? That would be Azazel's self-declared genius idea. It was first seen as stupid. Moronic. Absolutely unnecessary. But the former Governor-General of the Gregory was known to use his tongue to make the stupid sound genuinely marveling. Instead of waiting for the boy to prove himself capable of taking care of one depressed devil, and keeping her demonic secrets from leaking into society, and possibly cause very viral bad news, Azazel jumped several steps and got him a house instead. But his actual reason wasn't exactly that simple. Not that issei would know at this point in time. All he knew and cared was that they were given a house. Rainier would be staying there for safety measures, as would Roygun Belphegor for the exact same reason, as well as providing medical support and knowledge, and he was getting paid for it. More than his part-time job would earn. Unfortunately, all the payment must enter Roygun's pockets first. But if issei played his cards right, then no pockets were truly out of reach. Unluckily for him, he didn't know many card games. Suffice to say, the sudden development took him like a storm. Except the storm wasn't all bad, and he didn't really mind being wet. Oh my God! Yes, was Rainier's first impression upon seeing her bedroom located on the ground floor with a nearby bathroom, taking a slot out of possible 4. There were 2 other bedrooms on the upper floor, and issei wasn't sure if he liked the fact this house had 6 pre-built bedrooms in total, with 1 master bedroom taken by Roygun to no one's surprise and 5 guest bedrooms. 2 of which were meant to be children's bedrooms but clearly had been repurposed. Issei was standing behind her, curious. He thought there would be another devil already in the room. Or even a god just casually laying around on the bed. No god yet, fortunately. It was just a normal bedroom. With a bed, AC unit, a studying desk, a dresser, and a small shelf on the creamy white wallpaper. A window that gave view to the backyard, if Rainier ever felt the sudden need to take a shortcut, or to make herself look stupid by forgetting neighbors exist and spreading her wings again. Either way, Rainier tossed her suitcase over to her new bed and leapt onto it like the child she was. Hey, I kinda don't like this narrator, she muttered with a spiteful tone, looking directly at a corner. What? Oh, are you schizo now? Did you hit your head on the way here? Quick, how many fingers am I holding up? Rainier looked miffed. Mostly confused. How does that have anything to do with being schizophrenic? You know what? I don't care. Wrong answer. Don't care. She smugly dismissed. There's warm baths and showers here. Room is comfy. The walls are thick enough to mute your ramblings. There's nothing you can say that can ruin my mood. Issei raised one eyebrow smoothly, wickedly. A unique useless talent not many possess. Wanna bet? No. Too bad I'm evil. I take hollow victories. He sneered, and Rainier paled in horror just from mere expectations. Checked for roaches yet? Oh, and what about spiders? Or the crawlies? Oh, heard they like to go out more in the summer, don't they? Imagine one creeping up your toes, crawling up your legs. Rainier shuddered. She really should have known better. You and your entire bloodline. Issei cackled in his glory, closing the door shut behind him. Rainier had other things to do, and he had ran out of torture ideas for now. The air of the house was that of a house, and by that it meant it didn't smell like anything. Not musty, not fresh, just sorta there, like a side character of a badly written fanfic. But should he see someone start to spread scented candles here and there, then he would not hesitate to tip one over and claim it's the candle's fault for lighting things on fire just to ban its existence. Moving on with the day, With Grayfia currently tidying her own room and Rainier very positively lazing around, he should be unpacking his stuff. There weren't many boxes. At least unlike Rainier, he didn't require the service of a car to deliver all his stuff sometime during noon, which wouldn't arrive until several hours. Just like Rainier's, his bedroom had all the same things within it, except the windows were facing the front porch instead, just because he didn't have anything supernatural to hide. Not that it meant he didn't have anything to hide from the public eyes. Not out of fear or shame, but rather out of simple courtesy. He would gladly welcome any weary traveler to gaze upon his prized collection. Speaking of which, he should unbox those things later on once he got himself a bookshelf. There was a desk, but he wouldn't want to mix his college books with his porn collections because that'd mess up his organization. What if he took out the wrong book? Who the hell could get horny over arithmetics problems? Issei also left his door open as well as the windows, preferring to let the air in since it was a breezy sunny day. Zero chance of rain mainly for plot reasons. With summer already peeking from around the corner like a thief in the night, the air had begun warming up. He had heard many complaints like most people do, for humankind were flawed ungrateful cretins that could never be satisfied with what they have. Haida Issei, though he much preferred the cold over the heat, wouldn't mind a little bit of warm weather as long as it wasn't blisteringly hot. More to that, summer meant summer vacation, and summer vacation meant staying inside all day long and likely going out on a trip with his idiot friends for a day or two, or even a week if he remembered the plan they made during spring. Much fun to be had. Yay! As long as a sudden hurricane didn't ruin their plan. Then again, perhaps it would be best to delay it a couple of days or even weeks. There's a devil in his house and he shouldn't exactly leave her. Speaking of which, excuse me? A steely voice following several knocks on his open door took his attention from his college books. Issei glanced behind him to see Grayfia standing by the door. Mr. Hayato, all right. Please don't call me a Mr. or Sir. I'm really not that old. Mentally, I do feel twice as old though. Of course, my apologies, she nodded. Is there anything I can help with? The devil had recovered for the most part. She had much cleaner bandages wrapped around her waist still underneath her clothes, but other than that, she looked as healthy as a young woman would. Now with her maid get-up ditched and replaced with a pair of casual clothes given by Roygun, which was a beige button-down shirt with long black skirt, she looked much less conspicuous. Although it didn't help much in blending her with the crowd given the rare color of her hair, and her overall dignified glacial air and captivating pair of Brea's eyes, it was much better than having her walking around with a full French-maid outfit, though he could always claim she was a cosplayer. Or she was just a worker of a maid cafe who was on break. That reminded him to try out that new maid cafe sometime with his fellow degenerate friends so he could cringe himself to death and torture the living out of his friends. That said, Issei didn't need to be a certified psychiatrist to know she offered her help out of courtesy. She asked to help to put her mind off of certain dislikable things, memories she'd rather not dwell upon all day long. Sure, he said, smiling a bit. He didn't have much to unpack, but a pair of hands would be appreciated. Sooner he took care of his belongings, the sooner he could laze around. Grayfia dipped her head in a nod, slowly kneeling to sit with her legs tucked and leaning on one side. A casual sitting posture for women he'd seen often in Japan, actually. At least in those movies his mother practically forced him to watch during his junior high school days, as there was only one TV in his house. As she began to unpack another box, one filled with his clothes, the devil's fragrance entered his nose, and his mind started to wander around. How women always smelled nicer than men would always be a mystery to him. They could use the same soap, same shampoo, same amount of perfume, and their scent would always trample their male counterpart. Then again, he might just be biased to attractive women, and because all of his male friends had no qualms in showering once a day like the absolute Neanderthals they were. If their true name was Grog or Dungo, he wouldn't be the least shocked. How are you holding up? Issei asked to shift his attention to her. He could prattle about his best friend's disgruntling habits any other day. Feel any better? The maid nodded lightly. Yes. Thank you for asking. Physically and mentally? Issei asked straight, skipping the bullshit and shot straight at the core. The more pinpointed question had Grayfia stunned for a bit, as she had stopped placing his shirt neatly over the floor. She paused, thinking before asking back. I mean no offense by this, I am simply curious. Issei gave her a nod that screamed fire away. Then she continued, I fail to understand why you feel the need to be concerned about my well-being. We're hardly acquaintances. Yikes. Issei thought. He was expecting an answer like no, to be honest. Not another question, but he could and should answer nonetheless. It wasn't a difficult question for him. Well, that's because I don't feel the need. I just want to. Why? Because you're miserable. He answered just as straight, once again stunning her into a silent stare. You've lost everything. You're shutting yourself out from outside help. I'm not blaming you, just to be clear. Just wanted you to know you're not entirely alone in this, even though it might feel like it. There's me and Rainier. We'll be here if you need something. Me and my entire stock of drinks courtesy of the great and generous Azazel. Praise be his name. That doesn't answer my question. Although if it is by pity you offer those things, then I can't accept it. No, it's not pity. I don't ask you these questions because I feel bad for you. That's just rude. You can slap me if that's the case. But not too hard. Else I'll lose my head, literally. He mumbled the last few sentences, but loud enough for Grayfia to hear without straining, and managed to put the tiniest of smiles out of the corner of her. I ask those personal things and I will keep on doing so until you're at least alright, because I'm a nosy little bastard and because I want to. Compassion, in other words. Grayfia stared at him. A mix of shock and confusion, and a strange feeling she never experienced before. Amazement, perhaps, was the word to describe it. Compassion was not something hell was exactly known best for. Its rarity almost convinced her it was just another nice idea that could not exist in that place. At least until she came to serve the Gremory. A direct hit to her walls nonetheless. Grayfia lowered her silver eyes, resting them atop the pile of the neatly folded clothes. Most of it was red in color. She averted her eyes back to his as to not remember their hair and their family crest. Then why do you want to? He took a huff. Because I'm a selfish prick. He said without shame, surprising her once again. Selfish and simple. The best quality of a man you could ever hope for. I just want others around me to feel, at the very least, close to alright. They don't need to be okay because let's be real here. Nobody's ever okay. We be living in a society and such. And by making others feel slightly better, it makes me feel better. Selfish, am I right? She drew herself closer to him, intrigued by his words. How so? I dunno. I don't want to feel like shit. Feeling like shit makes me feel shittier. I don't want people I know to feel like shit. Earth is pretty ed up with wars, corruption, mass murders, diseases, global warming, dying animals, people dying like animals, people getting depressed all over the world because they overthink these things. Feeling powerless because these are the things only the filthy rich big bosses of the world can change. He kept his eyes on hers. Not once breaking eye contact. We're not as ed up as hell, but we'd be ignorant if we claimed the earth isn't a messed up place. So I had to make myself feel better about myself some other way. And so far, by bettering my small little corner of the world, I can tell to myself I'm not wasting my life doing jack shit. Like it or not, you're part of that little corner now, and you can't run away because then I'll have detachment issues. Why don't you worry about your own future? More worried about your future, to be honest. I don't care about myself that much. Contradictory to my earlier statement, I know. I can be selfish and selfless at the same time, okay? A frown had been cast upon her face during the middle of his explanation. At the end, a small smile took its place. You remind me of my masters. My former masters. She muttered. Sir's ex-Gremory rather, his entire family is an oddity, the same way you are. Gee thanks. Glad to know you see me as a weirdo. Grayfia appeared appalled. That's. I don't mean to. I know. Chill out. I joke around pretty much 24/7. Being sassy helps me deal with living. Go on. Don't let me stop you. Grayfia let her smile resettle slowly, and gazed down on the clothes in the cardboard box, staring at yet another red shirt. My old masters would ensure everyone else's needs were met before theirs. During a siege, devils could last days without food. But the siege lasted for months. When starvation began to linger, they ordered for the soldiers to be served the first rations. After their own children, of course. Then their people. Then their house servants. By the time the rations reached their dining table, it would be just several loaves of bread and slabs of meat from our own horses. All of the housemaids and butlers tried to give them their food, but they would always refuse. She raised her eyes. You have served us during our time of plenty. Let us at least repay you in our time of need. Lord Gremory himself said that in the pantry. It was stupid, I told him. They were the ones who could carry on their legacy, not their servants. But he replied by stating how grateful he was to have us as his servants. During my first years, I learned there weren't many nobles in servitude. Instead, there were plenty of low-born orphans serving as the housekeepers, widows who've lost their husband and son in battle, devils who had lost their place. But it never mattered who we were. We knew if there was anyone for us to serve until our death, it would be them. We didn't deserve any kindness, and yet they gave us everything. Grayfia choked, and blinked away the tears. I would gladly exchange my life for them. Any of them. I've never done anything to deserve being treated with such kindness. I was Lucifer's dog who butchered their own. I never expected their forgiveness, but they granted it without any demand. I am a sworn servant who has failed to protect my master's life. Failed to rescue anyone who deserved a better fate than to be buried in the ruins of their ancestral home. I shouldn't have been the one to be rescued and be sent to this world. Any single one of my masters deserved to be in this place far more than I do, but yet here I am, alive, while their legacy has been reduced into memories. A single drop of tear fell on the red shirt underneath, slowly deepening its color as it spread. Her first tears had fallen, and she didn't know how to stop them. I didn't deserve their kindness. She sobbed painfully. By no means do I deserve yours. Then earn it. He placed a hand on her shaking shoulder, squeezing it gently to get her to look at him. She did so reluctantly, perhaps out of a sense of courtesy again, but that didn't matter to him as long as she was looking at him. Earn this. For them. I'm no psychic, but I'm sure your master didn't save your life so you can torture yourself on another world. A tearing sob punched her throat, and Grayfia finally allowed herself to surrender to the pain she had stubbornly ignored. She sobbed as hard as she could. Each tear shed contained regret and sorrow. Regret that she couldn't serve them better, and sorrow for lives forever lost. Moments like this, Issei tried to imagine what his father would have done, and did just so. He slowly scooted over to her side, and firstly sat next to her. If she moved away, then he would leave her alone without a word. But she didn't. Grayfia stayed, even leaning closer to him, and so he pulled her into his, a hug he had been wanting to give the first time he noticed she was starting to cry. I'm sorry for your loss, he whispered. Not much else he could do, but Grayfia gave in, yielding into his, crying the rest of her tears, and accepted the fact that she was sad and couldn't handle it on her own. He said nothing else. He didn't ask if she was going to be okay. He didn't ask if she wanted anything else. He was young but wise enough to know solutions should be best reserved for a calmer time. He kept quiet and still as Grayfia dampened his shirt. No caressing whatsoever, because if he was in her place then he'd prefer it that way. For her, his silence was more than enough. His presence and empathy alone was enough to know he listened. In a world where people wanted to be listened to more than they wanted to listen, his silence was priceless. Break, you were crying, weren't you? No, I wasn't. Leave it to the fallen angel Rainier to tell a lie when the evidence of truth was right in front her eyes. Except her puffy eyes were the evidence here, and leave it to Issei to be the one annoying jerk who pointed it out. Why? Because they're friends, and friends like to jerk each other around. No, not exclusively in that way, you pervert. Not all the time, at least. Ah, you big soft-hearted you. You're making me regret not killing you that day. Do it anyway. No balls. I'm a girl. She hissed. We can't jump into something without concrete proof. When's the last time you checked? A couch cushion was thrown. Issei cast dodge. It missed its designated target and hit a wall, sliding down to the sofa. Issei was dealt 0 damage while Rainier had taken severe mental damage. I swear I'm going to kill you one of these days. Yeah, right. Issei laughed, then dropped his laughter and put on a face as serious as a homicide detective in a black and white film. Please don't. Or what? Or I'll be reincarnated to a devil by a super hot devil and start bullying you once again with superpowers that can make Superman look like a baby in strange blue tidies that doesn't know how to wear underwear properly. Rainier paused at that. You don't need superpowers for that. I know, right? Issei delved into the topic change as naturally as he breathed. What's up with his get-up? You think the person who came up with him has some underwear fetish or something? Rainier shrugged. How am I supposed to know? I mean, you're into some weird shit. Figured it takes one to know one. Die. Another pillow attack. It hit him square in his face. Issei was dealt 1 stupid damage. To assert his strength, Issei didn't flinch as he let the cushion fall off his face and into his lap. Unharmed from the fallen angel's vicious attack, he might have been hit, but he wasn't the one blushing himself to death from embarrassment. Is he here, dear Rainier? Rainier visibly flinched at his usage of dear. And Issei fully intended it to make her disgusted, so he had won another battle. Again, being one truly devoid of shame, no insults can harm me more than a kick to the balls would, which I would highly suggest against doing, because by God, don't ruin me family jewels. Well, they're small enough targets to not be hit by your crappy aim anyway. Rainer cackled into a laughter that sent her reeling and covered her face. She sounded like she was weeping, laughing at someone's insecurities. Typical. Issei scoffed snidely, pouring gasoline into the fire as the fallen angel couldn't contain herself, nearly laughing her tears out due to his unexpected comment. As far as the day went, it had been a relatively slow Sunday, and it was much appreciated compared to the hecticness of their 2 past days filled with wet clothes and yet zero. Not that they would get any in other different days, nor was it worth mentioning because it was a well-known fact between these 2 virgins. Grayfia was fast asleep. She exhausted herself after draining her tears. She wasn't meant to stay up either given her previous injuries, so the fact she was able to sleep during the day meant Roygon wouldn't be scolding any of them. But I gotta hand it to you, Hayadu, Rainer said, restarting the conversation as she finally calmed herself down. You did good back there. I know. Sometimes my awesomeness goes beyond my comprehension. Alright. I'm taking that back. Wait, that's illegal. Observe. Issei clutched his, wincing in fake pain. Arg. No. Anything but dangerously low self-confidence. Rainer gave out a few chuckles, shaking her head. It was hard to believe someone this gnomic could say those gentle words. But really, she shouldn't be surprised. He had done the same to her, after all. Minus the hugging and all the sobbing. She wasn't Grayfia, and she wasn't a big fan of physical contact. Ironic, considering her fallen angel origin. But he was there. And that was what really counted. But seriously though, Raina said, allowing herself to give him a smile. Might be a bit forced just so he could feel a bit better, but it's the thought that counts. I knew if there's anyone who could do it, it'd be you. What you mean? Do what? You knew what to do, PFT. No, I didn't, liar. I lie when it benefits me, but this ain't it, he said with a straight face. All I did was follow my heart. It took exactly 3 seconds of silent blank staring before the 2 erupted into laughter. You're way too good at this, Raina said between her coughs, desperate for air no thanks to him. It's disgusting how good that was. Oh my god, I feel so filthy. That's the difference between you and me. I have the confidence to turn cheesy lines into comedy. Kneel before your superior, ye shit. Kneel. Rainer did not kneel. Alright. For real this time, Hayadu. I'm being genuine here and you keep interrupting my genuine moments. Not my fault I'm hilarious. You're right. It's my fault for finding you're stupid to be funny. Rainer scoffed, grinning the last bit of laughter away. But really, I'm glad that you're here. Anyone else and she might have kept everything to herself like I did. I can tell you it's not an easy thing to do, being that stubborn. Yeah. Thanks. Issei nodded. He picked his moments wisely. This was not the time to joke, because then that'd turn him into an asshole who couldn't read the mood. Just doing what I can. How did you do it though? Rainer asked. If you say that follow your heart line again, then I won't guarantee your safety. Well, I don't know, he muttered. Can't exactly put it to words either. Sorta an instinct, you know? I did think about what my father would have done, but that's when I was deciding if it's fine to give her a hug or not. Not everyone wants to be touched when they're sad. Yeah. Rainer was that kind of someone. So what you're saying is you came up with those words yourself? He paused for a moment. Well, I did read some from the internet, but I'll take all credit. Rainer sighed. She should have known. Either way, it was all over and done. Well, I guess you did say it to her. Guess it's fair for you to take all of them. You can help her too, you know. You didn't have to do what I did. Rainer raised her brows. Was she that obvious? What do you mean? Well, I mean you both came from the same place. Not the exact latitude or longitude, but that doesn't matter. You and her both have lost something. Another sigh. This one was much more melancholic. Everyone has lost something, I see. True, but not everyone has lost everything and had to start from scratch. He told her without missing a beat, staring right into her eyes, conveying the sincerity of his statement. Give yourself some credit, dude. You're the toughest girl I know. Not that I know many girls. At times like this did Rainer wish to see him make an idiotic face or say something smart, because at moments like this did it get tougher for her to not fall for this human boy full of surprises. But she couldn't allow herself. Not now. Not while she was still traumatized from losing. I'm not gonna assume you've moved on or you're immune to the bad memories, but you got better. That takes something, right? Well, I sure hope you got better, he muttered, making a face. You can be an example for her. You know. Some kind of inspirator. Hell, you probably don't have to do anything and she'll learn from you either way. Rainer chuckled softly. If only he realized how sickeningly sweet he could be without noticing. Nah. We're different. She's of noble blood. I was a street urchin. And what? That doesn't make you lose points in the things you lost. Important things are subjective to people. I don't care if I lose an episode of a Korean drama, but there's some middle-aged lady out there that's tearing her hair off. He paused for a few seconds, staring elsewhere, realized what he just said, and looked back at her. Not the best metaphor I can come up with, but you get the idea. You're annoying, but you're even more annoying when you're right. It's in my blood to be annoying. Probably got dropped when I was a baby and hit my head on something. Issei said proudly, twisting a smirk. You can ask my mother. She'll tell you how annoying I was and am. Might even come up with an entire journal listing the amount of time I grayed a strand of her hair. Parents. Rainier wondered what it was like to have one. I'm glad you are who you are now. That took Issei by surprise. He stared at her, before making a grin. Oh. How heartfelt. That one came from the heart, right? Of course it did, silly. Nope. I said it just to see what stupid face you're gonna make. All this talk makes me hungry, she bemoaned, putting the serious conversation to a full stop as she threw her head back against the sofa's shoulder rest. Do we have anything in the fridge yet? Issei reverted back to his snark mode. Well, unless it's a magical self-replenishing fridge, then all we have for lunch is air and ice cubes. Not the most fulfilling meal, sadly. Unless you can turn ice cubes into bread. I'm not Jesus, you idiot. Rainier smirked. She didn't want this to change. All these silly jokes, she had found they were the most comfortable. Yeah. I guess Jesus wouldn't collect as much porn as I do, never mind. All that reserved feeling she had for him? Gone. Reduced to atoms. Wiped away from the face of the earth, never to resurface again. But that'd be an obvious lie, and Rainier exceptionally sucked at lying. Oh goddamn it. I knew I should have let you go alone. Damn you Azazel, damn you Lint. Hello? Anybody home? Wait, this is my home by practicality. Salvation came at the sound of the opening front door. They both turned around in their seats to bear witness as Royga and Belphegor emerged from the outside world, carrying several large circular containers that were black in color stacked on top one another, and in no way could either Issei or Rainier not recognize the traditional food container. Their bellows of help had not been unheard. The cavalry had cometh. And she brought fat plates of sushi. Marry me. No. Me. Oh my, I never knew I'd have suitors here on earth, as if it was hell. The devil woman chuckled, but really, she was not the focus of the two hungry land sharks encircling her, as she made her way to the dining table. Geez, did you not have anything to eat before I came here? I know I'm your legal guardian, she air-quoted as she placed the black plates, but you didn't need my permission to order something, and you're not wrong. Issei pointed out. Also, we're broke-ass students. We need to save our money for something important. Like games we want to play for 2 hours until we get bored of it, and never touch it again. Roygun looked concerned. My. Are you okay, boy? That sounded a little too specific to be a random rant. No. Please give money. MHM nice try, but no, Issei huffed. Adults are so unfair. He crossed his arms briefly. The tuna is mine. You can have the lame tuna. The salmon roe is mine. Rainier followed quickly. Oh no, dearies, I pay for these delicacies, I get the first pick. Hey, no fair. Issei cried out. What if I massage your shoulders? Must be tiring carrying all those heavy drums and all of that dosh that were supposed to be in my pocket, right? Well, that would depend on the quality of your service, but I'll keep your offer in mind. Roygun giggled suggestively, blatantly ignoring his last accusation, which wasn't mistaken. Where's Lucifuge, by the way? Sleeping. Don't talk with your mouth full, you disgusting caveman. Rainier groaned, shoving a whole sushi into her mouth straight after. And they taste even better when free. She finally sleeps? Roygun raised her sleek pink eyebrows. Huh. I expected to see her glooming alone elsewhere. She probably was going to. Rainier said. If not for this smooth talker here. Another surprise. Oh? What did you say to her? Issei swallowed his meal first. It was good. It was nice. His day had become better. Sorry, what? Lucifuge. Roygun asked curiously. Did you lull her to sleep? No. I didn't do anything. I swear. Issei paused, dropping his act when his joke fell short. I didn't do much. You're hyping me up too much, Rainier. Keep doing it. Rainier rolled her eyes. I didn't do much, honestly. She just sorta laid it all out. Yeah. That's not suggestive at all, Roygun understood. Good for her. Amazing for the boy. She had known the Lucifuge since they were miniatures of themselves, yet this was the first time she heard her willingly speak to anyone other than her masters. Maybe Azazel was onto something with the boy. Is that so? Well, way to go there, human? Thanks, devil. Roygun laughed. He knew how to deliver a deadpan joke, she'd give him that. No doubt an expertise molded by years of experience. And perhaps a just reward for lessening my burdens then? She smiled wickedly. Not one Rainier liked to see at the moment, as she had sensed the candidate for the heroine's spot was about to be usurped. Does your previous offer still stand, boy? Sure do. I'll stand on you if you want. Dear, oh dear. Roygun leaned closer to him, feeling the warmth of his human body. A tempting proposal. Clothes are optional, by the way. Even better. Her smile widened. His humor certainly helped in lifting her mood, that was for certain. Then Rainier took the responsibility of becoming the first cock-block of the story. Whoa there, did I suddenly turn invisible? Cut it out, you bunch of perverts. That's rich, coming from you. Issei pointed out. Everyone is a deviant to a degree. Some are simply more honest about it, Roygun wisely said as she stripped her white coat off, tossing it onto the couch, revealing her devilish figure hugged nicely by her black sleeveless sweater and her slim-fitting slitted black skirt. Her arms were ample and smooth, and she somehow managed to multiply her charm by simply lifting her hair upwards to tie it to a ponytail. The two university students paused. Issei stopped to marvel like the boy he was, while Rainier stopped to question her reality. Roygun didn't just have a nice body with a charming face to boot, she reinvented the hourglass. My. She smiled slyly, knowing exactly what was going on through their minds. Rather than stripping me with your own eyes, why don't you strip me with your hands instead? I don't bite. I prefer it if you do bite, rather. Issei snapped out of his trance. Welp. Can't argue with that. All right, cut it out. Rainier groaned. Hey, you were staring too. That was the hunger talking. Or staring. She corrected herself. Good point. I am pretty damn hungry. Can we eat now? Please? Or do I have to make some human sacrifice first? Will she do? I never agreed to this. Rainier stiffly said. Take him instead. I'll gladly take both. Sometime later in the night, perhaps. Roygun coolly said, eyeing the boy, checking for Rainier's reaction. I am indeed in terrible muscle pain at the moment, she sighed, her voice an alluring poison. A promise of a good massage I can't refuse. She blinked and paused when she realized Issei had strutted away with an entire plate. Rainier had brought smaller plates to pour the sauce in and to place their sushi. The two successfully carried their stolen meal to the coffee table by the interconnected living area like the goblins they were. Bastards. Roygun grumbled, smiling and sniggering anyway. Living with these two gremlins might not be so bad. They weren't kids, for one, just two young adults who sometimes acted like kids for the heck of it. She could get used to their presence faster. Especially since this place was far livelier. She had despised having to come to an empty apartment she forcefully called home. No one to listen to her meager complaints every time she arrived in the hour of the wolf. She could never kid herself into believing that place was ever her home. It was as empty and desolate as her castle in hell. Perhaps Azazel was aware of her untold fear of being lonely. Perhaps he knew the reason why she had no trouble sleeping in the office for days, working the extra hours just to know there were at least people there. He could see people better than he let on. That former governor had an uncanny ability to judge characters, and he judged that Hayate Issei could play a part during this whole turmoil. Or she might just be overthinking it, and Azazel's decision had nothing to do with it. Either way, this new start could be a welcome change. For her and Grayfia Lucifuge, two devils, both adults, desperate to salvage the pieces of their shattered life, who might have to rely on the help of a young man who was prone to snark yet somehow capable of returning a smile on Rainier's face when no therapists could. Whatever. She didn't care who or how. She wasn't like those stubborn noble devils who refused available help. Roygun was willing to take any sorts of it as long as she could sleep better. And if Azazel thought having the boy around could make her feel a bit better, then she would give him a fair chance. Everybody deserved at least a chance. She just wished she hadn't squandered hers. I'm going to take a shower, she said, half shouting, fully as a warning. Don't you rascals eat all of it. Spare some of the spicy mayos for me, or I won't ever grant you this luxury meal ever again. Yes, ma'am. Roger, ma'am. Issei shouted. Thank you, ma'am. Rainier followed with the same flat tone. You're very generous, ma'am. Beyond generous, ma'am. Your presence is a blessing to us all, ma'am. Issei shouted again just as Roygun entered her bedroom and replied with a shout. Quit calling me ma'am, else I will plow you through the wall. Damn. You're all into some extreme kinks, aren't you? Roygun was alone. Being alone was when she started to hear those voices again. When nobody was around to distract her mind from wandering to the past that had been stubbornly haunting her. Difficult to get used to, she had found, when those voices once belonged to her men. Men who valiantly fought for her, and died fulfilling their oaths to her family. She let out a long draw-out sigh, and rested her eyes. Perhaps she should have bribed either of the two little monsters to accompany her in her bath. Ah yes, the should have and the shouldn't have of life. The two best concoctions to fuel regret. Roygun smirked. Another pointless pondering. The past cannot be changed, she told herself. Sadly, it didn't mean the things she wished she didn't do or do would stop trying to tear away her sanity. Warm water tickled her chin as it rose to her cheeks, then the entirety of her head. She submerged herself in the bathtub, and yet still those voices rang as clear as though they were breathing down her neck. Not even water could muffle them. Idly, she wondered, should she drown herself, would the voices disappear? Or would they follow her even in the afterlife, wherever that place might be? Being underwater didn't help. Not at all surprising, as they were voices inside her head. Though it would be funny if they started to gurgle instead of whispering. Many things she had tried, and none of those worked. Pills helped, for a bit, until it started all over again. She out of all people understood the dangers of addiction, and had long since forsaken sertraline. Human-made drugs weren't as effective for her, unfortunately. Nonetheless, those were worth a shot. She was not a devil known to give up. A stubborn trait of her bloodline, perhaps. Failures didn't mean success was beyond her reach. She just didn't know when it would be within her reach. The water nipped at her skin, their warmth amenable. She would be more appreciative of this comforting bath if her mind wasn't at war. Shouting. Flames. Screaming. Terror. Blood. Mud. Blood. Death. Wailing. Silence. Out of all things, the silence was the worst. Like peace, silence never lasted long. Not in hell. Never in hell. As though it was cursed by a greater being. God, most likely, but she knew better than to lump all part of the blame on the old man. All the noble houses had become part of the curse, and the only thing that could have ended it. Unfortunately, they were too busy clawing each other or planning to claw each other behind their back to even consider the prospect of peace and quiet. They'd die first, as many have, and then hell would become the bleak, desolate land it was meant to be, with ungodly demons hunting for tormented souls failing to escape hell's grip. A permanent tomb for the fools who would take hollow victories. A giant scrapyard for every tall and proud castle reduced to ruins. One of such was the ruins of Gremory Castle. Venelana Gremory flew through the smoldering smoke, desperate for any signs of life. Her white dress had been marred by ashes and dirt, but clothing could always be replaced. Her family? Not so much. Clinging to a stubborn hope, she scanned the wreckage of her old home for survivors. For her family, she should have died together with her beloved, yet at the very last second before their enemies stormed their castle, a pentagram bearing the black rose, symbol of House Bael, emerged beneath her. Worse, Zeoticus Gremory had no traces of surprise on his face as he held her for the last time. It was planned all along. Her half-brother, now the head of the Bael clan as well as the self-proclaimed king of hell, had ripped her away from her family with the acknowledgement of her husband. And as the battle raged, all she could do was watch helplessly in her containment. A prison cell held up above the battlefield that nullified all of her demonic power. Die Hauserbelia was the most unexpected presence. But knowing the pragmatic cunningness of her half-brother, perhaps she should have expected this outcome. No matter. They didn't matter. The moment the scream of the one-sided battle died down, her confinement faded away, and she immediately headed straight for her children and husband. And then, buried among the dilapidated ruins, strewn a patch of crimson red. Those locks of hair could only belong to a member of her own. She dived down, landing before the large piece of fallen-down ceiling, and disintegrated it with an expert control of power of destruction. What lied beneath, or rather, who lied beneath, was the bloody body of her daughter. Another shade of red colored her forehead, and it wasn't her hair. Her breath hitched. Rias! She knelt and sat beside her daughter, carefully laying her head on her lap, and checked her pulses. It wasn't faint. She was alive through her ragged breathing. A sob punched her throat. My baby girl, look at what they have done to you. In her arms, Rias stirred. NNH. Rias! Her eyes widened with hope, a dangerous thing. Rias, if you can hear me, please open your eyes. And she did, slowly. Her eyes fluttered as did the heart of a worried mother. Rias looked up to her, and saw nothing. And mother, she croaked. her voice hoarse after inhaling all the smoke and dust. Is that you? Venelana fought hard not to cry further. Yes, my dear, she clutched Ria's searching hand, gripping it tight and afraid to let go. I'm here with you. And mother? Panic arose in her voice and face. I can't see? Why can't I see? No, the word was stuck in her throat. As Rias cried for her, Venelana remained in stunned silence. A shadow darkened the ruins. King Baal arrived with his battle-hardened officers following behind. Either of them had speckless armor. All were splattered with blood, as they fought alongside their own men to pummel any enemy officer into submission or death. And here we find the last Gremory. His voice was like tempered steel, hard and powerful. He turned to one of his officers, a lord from a house defeated by Lucifer. Lord Berith, order the men to end the search and set up camp. Let the demons feast on the dead. We rest here. At once, your grace. A brief nod of respect, and Lord Berith's 6 bat-like wings took him away. You gave your word. Venelana shouted between her tears. You promised to spare the children, and I remained true to my word. King Baal approached his half-sister, his shadow draping over the two. Father's last words are to spare his children. As far as I am concerned, you and I are his only children. You twisted father's words. You heartless monster, father loved my children. Venelana clutched Rias tightly. Rias was quiet, shocked by her being unable to see anymore, to process anything else other than the vast sea of blackness surrounding her, and the warmth of her mother's embrace. King Baal clammed his jaw and gritted his teeth. A bad habit he had developed due to the constant incompetence shown by lords of other houses, and now this. That son of yours murdered our father. I did not agree to your marriage so you can breed schemers and assassins. Surzex? Nonsense, he poisoned him. There is only one other devil I know who would make a deal with the poison of God, and that is your son. How he managed to get Samuel to agree I do not yet know, nor do I care. Father is dead. So is he. A debt paid in blood. King Baal stepped forward, and Venelana remained there, being the only wall for her last surviving child and her family's butcher. You have no proof it was him. I don't believe you. My son is not a schemer. Then you don't know your own son. His stern eyes always had a chilling gaze, and it pierced her skin the same way a spear had pierced through her husband's heart. He sowed the seed of rebellion, and he ignored my call to arms. A breaking of faith between our families so he can lead a band of low-born peasants into a war with a lost cause. Your lying Surzex would never. It doesn't matter what you believe in. What's done is done. Were it up to me, I'd have your head mounted on a spike as I have done to your husband and son, and that daughter of yours soon. Rias winced, shaking. To say her head was a mess would be an understatement. I don't know what reason beyond emotional attachment father has in keeping you alive, but he has provided guidance to me. I won't sully his last wish by what I think must be done. However, his last desire was to see a united hell. I intend to hold his ambition as though it is mine, and I suggest you do the same, half-sister. Surrender the girl. Her death will be swift. No, please. Venelana wept. But King Baal had been desensitized to let mere tears penetrate his strong sense of duty. You've taken everything I have. Let her live. She won't raise a hand against you. I swear on my name. Your name holds no weight anymore. He told her harshly. He was unsentimental, and King Baal never avoided telling the cold hard truths, tarnished by the Gremory for far too long. However, renounce your family name and embrace the true one. Swear on your true name neither you nor your offsprings will seek revenge for the dead house, and that you will do your duty as a woman of House Baal, to ensure your family line does not end in your death. Swear it, and I may yet spare the orphan. Mother? Venelana blinked back the tears, and asked Theodicus for forgiveness. He would have done the same to protect their dearest cubs. Renounce the Gremory's name as the daughter of Zekrom Baal. Good. King Baal nodded once. Though it grieved him to have useless sons, the children bore by his half-sister were all adept in handling the power of destruction. Maybe he had a curse upon his lineage, but no matter. The Baal line should prevail. Its legacy was all that mattered to him. Lord Belial, he motioned toward Dihauser Belial, the current head of House Belial who had served under House Baal since Rizavim Lucifer's death. Yes, your grace, we came here to rid the Gremory off the face of hell. I see only one. Ensure that it is done. You will strip her from her demonic powers. You will conjure a gate, and you will cast the girl to an ocean on earth, as you command, your grace. A rift severing the gap between two worlds appeared like a tear in the fabric of reality, and from Dihauser's right gauntlet, a wispy white smoke shot through the air, enveloping Ria's body as she could feel her strength being sapped away drastically. And Mom? She croaked more desperately this time. No! Venelana held Rias tighter. You can't do this! She attempted to cast a necrotic blast of her power of destruction, but Dihauser Belial swiftly snuffed it before it could form properly using his devastating family ability. I can and I must. King Baal responded in unkind. If I allow mercy to a traitor, then the faith from my subjects will be lost. I need them in order to end this pathetic squabble between houses once and for all. This goes beyond mere desires and wants, sister. Big or small, we must do our duty. Perhaps one day you will understand. Without her demonic power to enhance her physical strength, King Baal easily overpowered Venelana, tearing Rias off her grip as he motioned his officers to keep her still. As two officers gripped Venelana by her arms, King Baal dragged Rias over towards the gate. Mother? Her strength already sapped away from her injuries, Rias could only reach out a hand towards her mother in despair. A mother she couldn't even see. Brother, no! Please don't do this! Please! Have mercy! I will do anything you want from me. Uncle, please, you are my niece no longer as of this date. Our family has severed our last tie with yours. You're an orphan without a future in this place. Perhaps on Earth you may yet rebuild your life, but step a foot in hell, and we will hunt you down. I'll find you, my dear. I will find you. Unceremoniously, King Baal threw Rias into the swirling gate. Her scream was instantly shut out the moment the gate collapsed, resealing the torn spatial rift. Venelana sank to her knees, emptily staring at the last place she had seen her daughter, and wept. You're a cruel, heartless monster. And I thought you've become a better man since the Lucifer War. A spiteful glare. Nothing King Baal hadn't yet received. Normally, they wouldn't last that long to hold a stare. My sister is tired, he said to the officer standing next to her. See her escorted to her chamber in my family's castle. See her life is protected from her enemies and herself. My family has been plagued by a flock of brainless fools and a magically inept son. You can bring so much more for the betterment of this realm. I will allow you time to grieve, but I will not have you rot the remainder of your life. Venelana clenched her fist. As you command, my king. The officer nodded, and a magical pentagram formed beneath her and her captor. With one blinding flash, the two disappeared from the wasteland that once held the Gremory castle. What of her daughter, your grace? I meant not to question your decree. I was under the presumption killing her would rid you of any future nuances. King Baal stared at his officer, almost glaring. A lady from House Furcas. But this was simply the way he saw others, and those he trusted knew enough that he was not furious with them. The girl's blind and powerless. His voice did not command respect. It demanded it, and carried promises unkind to those that did not kneel. Blind, crippled and powerless, she can't lead an army nor inspire her people. Kill her should she dare to return to this realm. A nod, and the officers refrained from further questions. Lord Belial. How does the army fare? The men are exhausted, your grace. Dihauser stepped up to his side. We lost a quarter of our men during the fighting, most expectedly felled by Lord Surzex and Grayfia Lucifuge, whose body we have yet to find. Given his attachment to his servant, I suspect he has sent her somewhere either on Hell or Earth prior to his death in the throne room. King Baal gave it a thought, weighing the possibilities and the answers. Grayfia Lucifuge was a dangerous devil, but not undefeatable. If he could cut off Surzek's head with the aid of Dihauser Belial, doing the same to her wasn't nearly as hard. We've bested her once, and we'll best her as many times it'll take. Send out news that any house who is fostering a fugitive and a traitor will be driven to the mud. If she escaped to Earth, then leave her. The Earth is of no interest to our cause for this moment. Of course, your grace. Dihauser bowed politely. Loyalty, though rare, was not entirely lost on the devilkind. Dihauser happened to be fiercely loyal to the man who granted his family a chance to become part of the king's council once King Baal conquered the rest of the houses. And his loyalty was not lost on King Baal. You've served me well, through combat and counsel, and you spoke with reason. Something I seem to have trouble finding after the dozen houses we have trodden down. I don't want you to think once that your loyalty has gone unnoticed. Not at all, your grace. You have given me an opportunity to raise my house's status. I'm afraid our loyalty won't be enough to ever repay your trust. I never once asked for a reward, and loyalty without reward is mere slavery. King Baal spoke. Once I sit on the throne we built, you will be my hand. Once Dihauser stopped broadening his eyes in awe, he knelt down to his knees and bowed his head. No more exchange of words, as all that was needed to be said had been said. After receiving a gesture with his hand, Dihauser Belial arose no longer as a vanguard general, or the officer of the king's army. He stood in time for another arrival of another Baal. The youngest son of King Baal himself, Serorg Baal, a cursed devil for his inability to utilize a single spark of demonic power, and had long since been labeled as a failure by his father. The fact that King Baal sent him to lead the first charge to the front gate was not given as an honor or a careless suicidal attempt to break the defender's morale, but as a test if he could be a part of something and not put the Baal name to shame like the rest of his brothers did. Serorg huffed. His black armor was dented and splattered with gore and blood, but the devil himself was mostly unharmed. Dihauser saw him during the fight, and he fought like 5 lions. Since demonic power was hardly utilized during close quarters out of the consideration of hitting their own men, Serorg had proven to be an indispensable presence given his natural might. Your Grace. The young Baal knelt before his king father. We've secured the cellar. There's not a single soul left there as you've commanded, and we've taken the women and the children found as prisoners. Dihauser Belial studied King Baal's unmoving face. He didn't look proud. But he didn't look disappointed either. An odd feeling he wondered if it would last past this battle. Then he gave a nod. Those women and children will soon be under our rule. Have them sent to one of our empty lands. They will begin their lives anew while we reclaim this presently useless patch of dirt. Serorg dipped his head, but before he could excuse himself, King Baal continued, Lord Belial told me your fervor inspired the men under your command. I expect to see nothing less of the same you showed in your first real combat in future battles. Nevertheless, Your Grace. Serorg didn't raise his head yet, remaining careful not to lose his head over the first time his father made an acknowledgement of his accomplishment. He knew his place as the unfavored son and knew the rarity of this chance to finally prove he wasn't just a useless dumb muscle, that he could take part in forging the future of hell itself. Your praise honors me, Lord Belial. All he wanted was a chance, and his father finally granted it by sending him to lead the vanguard. Half expecting him to die. Good. That is expected of you. King Baal spoke, and Serorg's grew tight with expectations. Return to your tent and rest. Same for the rest of you except you, Lord Belial. You stay. Thank you, Your Grace. Nothing could describe his relief knowing he would fight another day for his house. At last, Serorg left the smoldering earth along with the rest of his father's generals, leaving the king and his hand alone. Dihauser waited in the uncomfortable silence. King Baal spoke and ended the conversation by his own terms. Anyone unwise enough to start a conversation with him without his permission might as well sign their death sentence. After a long silence, King Baal veered his sight from the castle that was nothing more than a pile of rubble towards Dihauser. With Gremory trampled to dust, the east is nearly ours. What do you propose on doing first, Lord Belial? Belial had seen this coming. We've raised the Gremory, yes, but their allies have yet to show their faces, Your Grace. It's possible they will bend their knees to you after refusing the Gremory's call to help. We can secure the east without spilling more blood. They've betrayed the Gremory. I will not have betrayers as allies. King Baal seethed. Blood will be spilled regardless. The only difference is time. Either we break them now or they will attempt to break us in the future should they be given the chance. In which case, I propose we strike the Phoenix first. Dihauser said pointedly. They provide Phoenix tears to their allies, and they do amass the most wealth out of all the other houses. If possible, we secure 1 or 2 as prisoners and grant us our own Phoenix tears. Or we can weed them out one by one. Small to big, King Baal's rugged face rarely showed a smile. A tiny smirk at best. One he was doing then upon hearing the suggestion. We've snuffed the rebellion and our largest threat. The men are inspired enough to believe they can take down the immortal bird. Once they are well rested, we will march to Flemeth and lay siege to House Phoenix. Destroy the bird and keep it grounded. The first thing she felt after she was thrown into the gate was cold wind shattering her body, before the cold salt water of the Pacific Ocean crashed into her. Her wounds screamed in pain that she couldn't even scream out of agony. Rias Gremory had never once given up hope, but this time, it might be the first. In the midst of her panic and pain, unable to see and now surrounded by seemingly unending depth of the ocean, Rias Gremory managed to reorient her sense of direction, and climbed her way up to the surface. Roygun gasped for breath as she resurfaced, spewing out water as she frantically looked around. She realized she was still in her bath. That was dangerous, she thought. Falling asleep in the bath was not the brightest idea she had. By Lilith she might just get one of those gremlins to her bathroom just so she didn't die a stupid death. Losing the mood to stay any longer, the devil exited the bathtub, dried herself with a towel, put on her comfortable cotton boxer briefs, and sauntered outside her bathroom, then her bedroom. Rainier was the first to take notice of the devil's rearrival to the living room, as well as her hardly clothed state of being. white towel draped around her neck and loosely hanging over her well-shaped top of one piece of underwear was not a complete set of outfit in her eyes. Issei mistook her sudden silence as a sign of her spirit wavering and nabbed the last piece of the sushi they had been fighting over for the last couple of seconds. The fallen angel and the devil exchanged an equally confused stare, in the meantime, blinking 2 times without breaking eye contact. Then Roygun figured out why. Oh right, I don't live by myself anymore. For a second I was surprised to see you two in my house. Issei turned around. As he was in the process of shoveling another piece of sushi into his mouth, his were parted and naturally ajar. Rainier peered over to him, curious to how he would react, expecting him to be blown away by a pair of shapely lump of meat with a nipple on each of them. Roygun even waited along, saying nothing, equally curious. He closed his mouth. With unnatural calmness, almost at peace, he settled the piece of sushi held by his chopstick back down to his plate. With sincerity, he pursed his, and nodded with full approval. Ma'am, he began, still nodding, earning their full undivided attention. Although it wounds my limited honor as a law-abiding citizen, I will gladly accept your effort to literally prostitute yourself to me. Both Roygun and Rainier threw her head back and clapped their hands once, twice, shaking their head and failing miserably in containing their laughter. Sushi was nice. We're nice. Sushi and boobies must be pretty close to heaven, he thought, as he continued his feast with both his taste buds and eyes. To be continued. So far you've only heard of Hell's shithole situation from a third person aside from Roygun's brief flashback. So in this side chapter 1 wanna just show another snippet of its current situation, and the drastic difference, and the whiplash in mood between Hell and the house. Grim and dark compared to the 2 goblins fighting over a filleted fish on top of a ball of rice. King Bale might need a name soon. Suggest a way if you want, just so you won't confuse the order of things. This event happened not long before Grayfia got into the story, so it was indeed an event from the past. Side chapters like this won't appear often, really. This is kinda in an interim chapter between the completion of the last arc and the beginning of the next one, hence the interlude. If you like it, then I'll write some stuff about King Bale's progress and his journey of eating the entire hell between arcs, for 6 chapters per arc. No, Rias won't ever amass an army of her own. This isn't the kind of story to have bullcrap-ass pull heroics in it where the good guys somehow always win. She might even just drown without ever making another appearance. You'll never know until I let you, and mother, she croaked, her voice hoarse after inhaling all the smoke and dust. Is that you? Venelana fought hard not to cry further. Yes, my dear, she clutched Ria's searching hand, gripping it tight and afraid to let go. I'm here with you. And mother? Panic arose in her voice and face. I can't see? Why can't I see? Oh God, it's in my eye, it's in my eyes. Venelana paused before realizing this was out of script. The fake blood? Someone fetch her water and towel. King Bale scrambled away off the set in search of water and towel, yelling, my niece requires immediate aid for her eyes. Well, that ruined the moment. Issei muttered loud enough in his actor chair to cause Serorg, the person sitting next to him, to chuckle. Hey Sai, when do you think we're doing the next shoot for Academy? What? The one where you lie in bed all episode? Serorg asked amidst the chaos running in the background, with Arias possibly going blind from red food coloring. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to that. I'll double my effort in lying down, doing nothing while you do all the plot-related stuff. Bribing Jean and all that. Sure you would, buddy. I'm sure you would. Serorg rolled his eyes. In and out of character, Issei was a snarky prick. Was not a beautiful Monday afternoon, but the fact that there were no classes after 12 made it slightly prettier. Issei was fully planning and committing to completely waste the entire remainder of his days in absolute lethargy, and becoming the least productive member of society by heading straight home and tuck in. He had to wake up earliest during Mondays, as if Mondays weren't unfairly despised enough. He believed the people responsible for the scheduling were the kind of people who wanted to watch the world burn brighter. Unfortunately, fate laughed at his face and spit on his shoes as Rainier just had to fill up his lazing hours without his consent and throw a bunch of made-up adult words like responsibilities and the right thing to do. Look, I'm not saying I don't want to go out shopping with you, but I don't want to go out shopping with you. Rainier rolled her eyes. This had been a long walk home and it wasn't going any shorter. Oh please, want it or not, you signed up for this kind of thing. She'll have to be under supervision for the first week, remember? Why can't you do that instead then? Because I'm supposed to watch you while you are watching over her. Rainier replied pointedly, not taking a no for an answer. Besides, it's Monday. The local mall should be empty. No forcing or talking his way out of this trip to hell, it seemed. It wasn't so much about him having a distaste towards overpriced clothes because they had a tiny logo on it, but more about the fact he had gone to clothing stores with her and the rest of their usual party. Murayama, Kates, Aika, Matsuda and Motohama. Ever since that fateful day filled with much weeping and the gnashing of teeth, the boys had made an agreement to never take part in the girls' unholy search for some articles of clothing. It's not about if it's empty or not, Issei grumbled. He had yielded his fate, but that didn't mean he wasn't allowed to mope about it. What then? Rainer asked, genuinely curious and oblivious of her part in traumatizing the boys. Do you just hate shopping? Not even that. Shopping itself doesn't suck if you know what you want. You go in and get it. It's the wandering aimlessly into every store to see if there is something there that you might like that's bothering me. Yeah, well, how else are we going to know if there's something better we do like? Alright, that's fair enough. Issei conceded, though not completely giving up the argument that was being argued for the sake of killing time. However, the speed you guys did it can make a turtle look like a bullet train. Look, we want to be thorough. There's plenty of cute clothes being hidden behind the lame ones. How would you do it then? Like every normal human being? Walk in, find anything I want, check the price for the thing I want, scoff at the price I don't want, and walk out. But that's easy for you to say, Rainer defended, barely managing not to laugh at her very vivid imagination of Issei doing what he described. I sympathize with you boys. They don't have as many clothing options. Everywhere it's black shirt and jeans, black shirt and jeans. Occasionally jogger pants or flannel shirt. If they do, I bet they'll take their time too. Issei gave it a fair thought. Nah. You don't get the male brain. We get distracted easily. By the time you're finished finding what you want, we'll already have a dozen more wants that aren't related to feckin' clothes, and one of them is usually getting the hell out of that place. They bickered their whole way, but Issei still would go. He knew Grayfia needed actual clothes and not some hands-me-down by Roygun. Their guardian had transferred him the money for it as well, although he didn't expect he'd have to do it this soon. Well, Issei figured he might as well have a walk around and show Grayfia some parts of the town. Move his legs a bit. Take in the sun he rarely took otherwise. Perhaps stare at some lingeries and ask Rainer extremely uncomfortable questions so she'd consider leaving sooner. The two arrived safely in their new place without encountering any weird encounters with demons or devils. Issei unlocked the door and swung it inside. It was agreed that the front door should be locked at all times regardless of their whereabouts for safety measures. Not to lock in the maid devil. She had her own copy of the key stored somewhere. They stored their shoes on the rack near the entrance, and slipped into their house slippers before heading down the small hallway into the living room. If there weren't any walls to their left, they would have seen the kitchen. Grayfia was there, holding the fort, sitting on a couch, gazing into the empty mowed lawn of their backyard with an equally empty stare. Her hair was let down. She had never tied it to her usual twin braids since crashing on Earth. Afternoon, Grayfia. Issei greeted, purposely speaking louder than he would normally, drawing her attention and snapping her out of her trance as she instinctively stood up and adopted a formal stature. Good afternoon, Mr. Hayado, Ms. Rainer. Hey now. We talked about this yesterday. Issei reminded as he walked to his bedroom. No mistering or missing. Grayfia nodded, saying a quiet apology. What he said? The fallen angel followed, also heading to her room. Oh, Grayfia, we're going to look for clothes for you. Can you come? You really should. Issei said as he just opened his door and swung his sling backpack to his bed and shut the door. Rainer did more or less the same, except she settled her bag on her desk unlike the caveman over yonder. I don't think Rainer has your measurements down. Clothings? The devil asked, appearing confused. I have enough clothes without having to wear the same one every day. Yeah? Tell me about it. Simplicity is best. Don't listen to him. You need more sets than just two and a maid's outfit. Rainer said as the two sauntered to the kitchen for a quick glass of water. We can show you around too later on, assuming we ever get out. It won't take long. Rainer insisted, shooting a glare. The clothes are for her, not me. Like that'll stop you from looking around. Rainer couldn't respond to that since it was true. Anyway, let's go. We should stock up on food too while we're at it. We'll blow our wallets if we rely on takeaways all the time. As long as you ain't the one cookin', I ain't complainin'. Rainer took no offense to that. She'd rather have someone cook for her than the other way around. You can cook, right, Grayfia? Her gray eyes lit up. It was faint, but much appreciated nonetheless. Yes. If you would. Break. It didn't take them long to walk from their house to the local mall, and during their entire walk, not rarely any passers-by would let their eyes linger on the silver-haired devil. Sometimes a little bit too long that they hit a lamppost, or another unfocused pedestrian. Grayfia remained oblivious to her own unnatural natural beauty, of course. More due to the fact the devils were simply born flawlessly beautiful than no one truly ever stood out. I've seen this one coming miles away, but this is beyond my imagination, Rainier quietly said. She was walking in the middle with Issei to her right and the eye-catcher devil on the other side. Look at that guy, that's 40 out of 40 now. Well, I mean, can you blame them? Guess not. I don't see many foreigners here aside from Lint and her brother. Rainier shrugged. Are you bothered by any of this, Grayfia? Grayfia glanced at her. Yes? By what exactly? Oh wow. You're not even aware of it. Good on you. I apologize. I wasn't paying attention. No. It's better that you don't for once, Issei said. Although still bemuddled, Grayfia refrained from asking anything. A human, fallen angel, and devil entered a clothing store, a sentence that might become a cheesy opening to a joke, but this was not a joke. And if it was, then Issei felt to be the punchline that wasn't funny and at best some forced awkward chuckles. He had resigned to fate, and had accepted he would be the pack mule. Finding empty chairs would be his primary objective at every store they entered. The first one, however, was an exception. Mostly because there weren't any other customers yet. But come late afternoon, his energy level and his tolerance to crowds would surely plummet. Have a look around, Grayfia, Rainier told her. You can try them on too if you find anything you like. I'll try to find you something too, since I'm positive you haven't done this before. Not at all, she said, her eyes traveling from one clothing stand to the next. This is all new to me. I got Penemu to help me when I got here. Guess I'm advancing the tradition. Rainier muttered to nobody in particular, as she slowly wandered into a separate section. Issei, you go help her. Sure. Because no one understands women's fashion more than I do, he said under his breath, tagging along anyway with the devil. He could sense a sales lady coming over from the counter to pounce on her prey. How can I be of help, Grayfia? The two blinked and they turned around to see a familiar face instead. Lint, lo Hayadu. Lint Selzen waved a hand, then placed both behind her, as she leaned slightly forward cutely. Clothes for the new devil in town, HM? I didn't know you work here too? I don't. Just filling in for a sick friend until the next shift, Lint said, tilting her head to one side. Oh wow. You're much prettier up close and when you're not bedridden. I thank you. Grayfia nodded out of courtesy. Pardon me, young lady, have we met before? No, P. You were unconscious, Lint said in a carefree tone, ever bubbly and generally seemed to always have a good time by herself. You met my brother though. He's the one who whacked you in the head. I see. Grayfia sounded a bit disturbed on the confession. Lint extended a hand. Lint Selzen. Nice to meet ya, Grayfia Lucifuge. Is mine. Grayfia shook it gingerly, rarely having to deal with informal introductions like this when a simple handshake was all it required. In the background, Issei shook his own hands. With introductions done, I'll now do my job. Lint hummed. So, what kind of clothes are you looking for? Grayfia visibly struggled to give a response. The clothes she remembered wearing were either her maid outfit or her sleepwear during the night. Just casual ones. Issei came to the rescue, eyeballing the casual wear. Ones she can wear in the house and out. Lint nodded sagaciously, sizing up Grayfia. Well, anything M size will probably be a bit tight on the. A very soft tinge of red splashed down the devil's cheeks. I am not sure how I can mitigate that. Don't. Issei said straightforwardly. Lint sniggered. Heh, the guy knows his preferences. As he should. Issei responded. Well, Lint. Do your thing. You can never go wrong with turtleneck sweaters. Makes you look a lot more mature and stuff. Lint said, pointing to the only outerwear rack. Cardigans. Cardigans are simple and nice. The long ones are more stylish but kinda a pain in the neck when they keep getting stuck on something. You can wear them over a shirt. Or nothing at all. Issei supported the suggestion. Grayfia did her best to comprehend these humanly fashioned senses, failing marvelously when the term cardigan hit. Oh, and you can always use a white dress shirt, of course. They're practically good for any occasion and pairs great with plenty of legwear. A must-have in your dresser. Lint then unhanged one from a rack, handing it over to a very bewildered Grayfia. At this time, Issei wasn't sure if she was offering genuine opinion, or trying to goad them into buying as much as possible. Go ahead and try this one. At least dress shirts she was knowledgeable of. The devil nobility usually wore one underneath their regal outfit. She couldn't remember the last time she wore hers, however. Taking the shirt and letting it rest on her arm, Grayfia then quietly and smoothly took off her blue blouse in one quick motion. P.F. Lint's red eyes went several sizes larger upon being presented with two big surprises held by a black brassiere. Laces, wow. Are those G for Grayfia? While I don't think it's illegal to strip in public, I don't think you should. You're supposed to do that in the changing room, Grayfia, issei said to her, further amused by Lint's reaction and Grayfia's owlish blinking. Oh. She flatly responded, putting her blouse back on. No shame whatsoever for showing a generous amount of skin. My apologies. PFFF, sorry? I should be thanking you. Grayfia tilted her head to one side, processing the meaning of the gratitude. She didn't get it, but then she did, felt extremely silly for it, and felt the heat rising up to her cheeks as she reminded herself she wasn't in hell, and around her weren't other housemaids or staffs of the house. Well, she got a little bit sad afterwards, which issei noticed due to her sudden silence and the drop of her eyes, so he told Lint to get whatever she could and drag her into the changing room. He noticed Lint grabbing several bras and some panties. He shrugged. If Lint thought a pair of lacy knickers could fend away depression, then he wasn't going to ruin her messed-up optimism. Break. What if? Rainier quickly turned him down. No, we don't want or need to hear it. Too bad issei wasn't looking for answers. What if the skeleton inside all of us are just waiting to hatch, and we're just an incubator? An unsettling thought. A more unsettling image to be imagined. Jesus Christ, issei. Hee. Food for thought. Be right back. Toilet. He sniggered his devilish chuckling as he stood up from his seat, wading through some empty chairs and tables belonging to a coffee house they decided to visit. A short rest, before eventually they go on to buy their groceries and other whatnots. Plenty of brown paper bags were placed neatly on the otherwise empty seat of 4, all containing clothes for the new devil in town. Some handpicked by Rainier, some more by Lint, and very few were chosen by the devil herself. She didn't mind, however. Rainier idly checked her phone for the time. The sun should be setting soon, and that meant the mall would be packed with office workers who had overworked themselves without knowing. She also realized this was the first time she was alone with Grayfia. How did you find the town so far? She initiated as she disliked the silence. We didn't get to show you around that much of it, but it's a small town. Not much to see, really. It's peaceful. Grayfia replied, settling her half-empty cup of black coffee on the table, the only one in the group. You were a stranger to this town once. The quietness can be rather jarring, is it? Yeah. More or less. Rainier planted her back against the cheap cafe chair all coffeehouses use. There's still wars around the world, but they're not next to you. You can't hear them, and they don't often show up on the news unless it concerns Japan. Human countries are selfish like that. Out of sight, out of mind, I guess. You'll get used to it eventually. I see. What was it like for you? Your early days of being here. Well, Rainier paused, giving it a thought. There weren't people seated nearby, so she supposed she could talk more openly. I don't know about what was going on your end of the underworld, but we fallen angels started to flock here not long after the war ended. War between devils and fallen angels, I mean. Are you angry with us? The devils? Collectively? Yeah. Of course I do. I lost families and friends over a stupid war because we looked different. We were both cast out from heaven and hated the angels, and it's not like we have a lot of land either. The great houses sought for a common enemy. I'm afraid a temporary one to prolong the inevitable civil war. Yeah, I know. Rainier sighed. I know that. Still, it's frustrating to know how meaningless a life can be over there. Penemu found me when the Gremory was looking for survivors. Said I was buried in pieces of concrete walls and was lucky none of my limbs didn't need to be amputated. Sure didn't feel lucky once I found out most of my friends are dead and none of my family survived. Felt like dying was better than being alive. Not a feeling unfamiliar to her, unfortunately. Then how did you pull through? I'm not sure, to be honest. Rainier took a sip of her cold caffeinated beverage, swishing it around, hearing the ice cubes clack. Guess I'm too scared of dying. Too scared to die but didn't want to live. Not the greatest feeling in the world. I sort of just exist, I guess. And then one day I was enrolled in the uni. To distract myself, they'd say, and it did work. For me, at least. How so? Grayfia asked, genuinely curious. By doing things, I suppose. Assignments. Studying. Anything uni-related stuff. Rainier shrugged. Distractions. Help keep my mind from wandering too far back. It's always the toughest in the start, and it doesn't always get easier right away. It took me half a year to be fully functioning again, where I don't necessarily get too sad when I think about it. I still get sad, but it's nothing unmanageable. Grayfia wondered how long it would take her to be whoever she was before, and not get caught in the webbing of her sadder memories. But I think it took me that long because I don't have anyone I can really talk to. Rainier continued. You know, like people who know about hell. There's Penemu and Azazel and the people in Gregory, but they're busy people. What about Issei? Was he not your friend? Oh, he was. By accident. Rainier could barely contain herself from breaking into a laughter because she remembered his stupid line of "Hey, my mother said that to me as well." It's a bit embarrassing, really. I knew him before. He was in the same university, but we never really talked. One day he walked in on me when I was spreading my wings in the most literal manner possible. Grayfia blinked, and chuckled a womanly chuckle. It had the same mature vibe with Penemu's chuckle. But he's a good kind of accident, in the end. Rainier smiled fondly. I noticed I started to laugh more after that. He's irritating but funny, and he knows it, and he knows how to piss me off or flip my stomach from laughing. His two best friends said he's been a class clown since he's inside his mother's. He's not the obnoxious kind and is aware of when to say his stupid jokes, which is good. He isn't forcing himself to be funny, at least. A beat, before she could continue. He's also a good listener, as you could tell already. The rare kind too. He actually listens, not listens to respond. Not the irritating one who gives live advice or constantly interrupting to put in a stupid out-of-place joke. He does the same to everyone too. Boy or girl, no special treatment or personal agenda. He'll be teasing me all year long if he found out I'm gushing about him like this, so keep it a secret, alright? Of course. Grayfia did a tiny nod, just a small dipping of her chin. He is quite kind, isn't he? Is it rare? What? Kindness? Grayfia said. Or is it the same as it is in hell? Where you can barely gather a grain of it? That's a heavy question. Rainier blinked. Oh well, I think most people around me are kind, but they're also too tired to be kind, I guess. If you're asking about humans, then I don't know. Most of them seem to always want to get something in return or awfully ignorant that they're not aware of it. I can't stand most of them. How so? Well, it's not like I understand them either, how they're so addicted to themselves, I feel like, and always wanting to be heard even if they have to be loud. It's always look at me, don't you see how interesting I am? How quirky I am? How funny, smart, popular, attractive, successful, and such. I don't get why people is so narcissistic. Because they have no life-threatening issues, most likely. Rainier sniggered. Yeah. Probably. I thank you for this insight. Thanks for listening to my pointless rambling. What pointless rambling? And came Issei with a new cup of iced chocolate in his hand, taking a seat on his chair. What? Were you talking about how wonderful I am and how you missed me horribly even though I've only been gone for a couple of minutes? Or did you find out I was going to leave so I won't have to pay or carry the damn bags? Your phrases make me sick sometimes. Rainier shook her head, not without a smile, however. So not all the time. I'll take that. Issei raised his cup, saluting himself for his greatest achievement of not being a constant bother. May I ask you a question or two, Issei? Issei paused, tossing a skeptical look over to Rainier, who shrugged back. Sure. Fire away. Do you like to listen? Listen to what? Music? To people. Grayfia clarified. Issei blinked. No. I hate people. Grayfia blinked. Rainier blinked. I like listening to a person. Not people. People are horrible to listen to, he said. Sorta like bored housewives. Alone? You can ask them how their day was and they'd pour everything on you, from tales of their high school crushes to the stupid actions their dumb husband do at home. But then you put a 50% off discount on anything, they'll turn into people. A person has hopes and dreams. People are just animals that look like humans. Fair enough. Rainier nodded, marginally impressed about his way of telling stupid things to make it sound wiser than it should. You haven't answered her question though. Oh. Why I like to listen to a person? An individual? Grayfia nodded. Because individuals are interesting. They're more real. Some of them, at least. Issei said, shrugging as if his answer was nothing more than an afterthought. And who doesn't like to be listened to? You show them that you're into whatever it is they are talking about, and they'll like you. Sometimes they treat you to a good steakhouse. So you did it for the benefits you may get? Oh yes. Totally. Why give a damn about someone else? Everything I did it all for me. He sniggered. Is what I would say, if I don't have a big ing heart. I'm a blessing to this world and I'm disappointed I don't have a cult started for me yet. I still don't see the logical reason behind it. The logic is, the world sucks. Everyone's out for themselves. I don't see the logical reason for adding more into it. Because other people are doing it? Rainer asked in answer. That's a lazy excuse and you know it. Issei scoffed. Look. I'm a good boy. A very good boy. But I do think that if people do good to look good, they're never good to begin with. I don't want to be like that. Just remember this whenever I do something that hopefully makes either of your days a tad bit nicer. Today you, tomorrow me. Grayfia kept her eyes at him, looking at him with a familiar sense of amazement. He was younger than her, a commoner compared to all the nobles she had served and had a ball with, yet he already held her interest more than her past suitors could ever hope for. Meanwhile, Rainer started to tap her empty plastic glass with her fingers. She thought she could suppress her feelings by fearing a chance of losing him, but after all that, after hearing from himself and knowing from his actions that all he had done for her, all the small talk they had that she kept deep in her memories to look back upon so she could smile to herself, was never an act of a multifaceted person but the genuine act of the kindest, most sarcastic man she had ever met, she was about to explode from her own growing feelings. She wanted to hug him. Hold him real tightly. But she didn't want any of this to change. She didn't want to do anything that might create a wall between them. She liked listening to his stupid jokes. Doing stupid things with him. She didn't want to lose that. Anyway, enough about me. I feel like I'm showing off my amazing qualities as a person, which I totally am, he said with a cheeky grin, and Grayfia chuckled softly, signing her agreement. We gotta buy food and stuff, right? Let's go to the grocery store before it gets packed with people I don't like. Break. Not long after sundown, the trio finally arrived at their shared home. After putting away the foodstuff in their proper storage, Rainer immediately took a shower, heading straight to her bedroom afterwards, telling them that she was still full to skip dinner. Grayfia tucked in early as well after she grilled a piece of steak for Roygan, who would arrive late. The devil was still exhausted and was still in her recovery phase, although at least now her expressions weren't as stiff and some weights were lifted off her shoulders. Issei was okay with that, and now, he was by himself. He was okay with this too. He enjoyed having companies he liked, but he also needed time for himself. Sitting on his own in the living room that felt strangely bigger thanks to the lack of noises or gremlin laughters, Issei took a shot from the chilled vodka Azazel had bought for him. He immediately hacked as the burning sensation warmed his throat and a funny feeling tickled his nose. Whoa! That was a kick, isn't this thing? He brought the crystal clear bottle to his face, reading the tiny words on the red label of the otherwise transparent glass, and searched for a specific number. His eyes widened as he found it. 70? 70% alcohol. No wonder he felt like someone had just roundhouse kicked his throat. Lesson learned. Check for the actual alcohol content first. One's enough for the day. Tomorrow was Tuesday, and Tuesday was business management. How would he manage business if he couldn't manage to stay sober? Being the rare responsible young adult, he stored the poison in the bottle back to the refrigerator. After taking another shot, and regretting it seconds later, he glanced up to the ticking clock, checking the time, and realized he had been alone for 3 hours and more. Just another hour and it'd be midnight. Still, no signs of Roygan, until the front door said, "Speak of the devil," and slurred words followed. "I'm home." "Hick HR, mem? Is this my home?" "Great. She's piss drunk. Devils could get intoxicated." Noted. He should store that vodka elsewhere in a safer place. Like a newborn fawn, the hot doctor appeared from the small corridor of the entrance, looking like a hot mess leaning against the wall on her side that was the only thing preventing her from collapsing. Despite her blurriness and slurriness, she managed to spot a blurred figure, staring at her with a blurry face. "Fun night out, eh? Heh? The hell's you? Thief?" She raised her hand, and Issei had the sense to pale and duck for cover, until Roygan retracted her hand. "Harem, wait, no magic bad. Yes. Magic bad. Bad for Issei, yes. Issei? Zad you? Yeah. Zis I." He responded blandly, approaching her and offering her a hand and his shoulder. Roygan took the offer by slumping her whole weight on his side, her waist bag falling off her. He felt the warmth of her body seeping through her sweater. A soft sensation against his already whispering bad things to his head. Bad things like no one would know if he copped to feel. Too bad for his bad thoughts. He had standards. It wasn't a high standard, but drunken hot ladies didn't meet his requirements. "You're heavy." So he said. "Smells like liquor and bad decisions." "Huh! Rude thing to say to a lady. You're hurting my feelings. Facts don't care about your feelings." As so rude, Roygan continued to slur as Issei helped her to her bedroom, opening the door and carrying her to her king-sized bed. The devil sprawled over it on her back, squirming as she made herself comfortable, messing up the sheets by her worming. He huffed. Job well done. Where you goin'? Lock the door. He replied straight. Then probably sleep after I splash water on you. He sleeps same way I'm heading. Roygun tittered, not hearing the last bit of his sentence. Drunken still, she had enough strength to sit up on her own, not straight, and very much woozy as she seemed like she was about to tip over, but she proved him wrong. Let's do it together, a tempting offer. But an offer offered by a drunk was not an offer at all. It's a bad idea to sleep drunk, he told her pointedly, moving towards the exit. I'll be right back. Try to I dunno not fall over and die because you hit your head or something. The mature-looking pink-haired devil giggled like a schoolgirl with pigtails. But what if I wanted to die? All right. He didn't expect that bombshell. Issei turned around, now fully concerned for another reason. Some jokes aren't that funny, Roygun. Who's saying I'm joking? I'm dead serious here. Hey dead, did you catch that? That was a pun, Very smart you are. He should lock the front door fast and sober her up ASAP. Just stay here, alright? I'll be quick. A sad frown fell on her pretty face. Her gloss despite the lights were off still. Only the gentle moonlight that passed by the dark blue curtains protected the room from complete darkness. Please don't leave. Issei paused, and saw how vulnerable she was, and how sad she was, and that despite her jokes and smiles and natural charismatic confidence, Roygun had her own shares of troubles. Although he would have preferred to discover it not in this manner, and by her saying it to him herself, not under the influence of whatever alcohol was swirling her mind, he knew he wanted to be a support for her, if she allowed him, just temporarily. He promised her. That's what they all say. I'm not whatever they are. Issei Pace walked outside like a man on a mission, locked the front door, shut the glass sliding door leading to the side yard, and came back with her purse. Her eyes lit up as she spotted him. You're back. Well, course you did. You're not dead. They're dead. I'm not. I probably should be. Issei placed her handbag on top of a dresser. This was one giant landmine he had to face head-on, otherwise it'd make it awkward for her. Unlike what was often depicted in movies, the drunk do remember the next day. Admitting they remembered, however, was another thing entirely and more difficult than simply denying it. You need to take a bath. At least wash your face. Make me, Roygun mumbled, trying to look as challenging as she could manage. I mean carry me. Alright. Just this one time, yeah? Next time, you're the one carrying me. A deal. Careful about making a deal with the devil, boy. Oh, shiver me timbers. Issei huffed as he walked towards her, bending slightly to help her get up to her feet. Except Roygun flung her arms around his neck and propelled herself off the bed with a wee, nearly causing him to fall, but he just stumbled several paces back. Alright, let's agree to not do that again. He could smell the distinct scent of whiskey. You disgusting drink. But he wasn't here to complain about her taste in drinks. Got you. You done got me, you did. Issei maintained his bland face, slowly dragging them both to her bathroom. Stay. Don't really have any other options when you're holding me like this, he said, not yet aware that Roygun was no longer as drunk. Her own jump earlier seemed to have yanked away some of the toxic in her body. I mean after you get me in there, she whispered, and he paused again, shifting his head in an awkward angle to look at her. Her emerald eyes met his coffee brown. Just for a moment, he knew where this was heading. She had sobered up, and now intending to use to keep him quiet or to make him pretend this never happened. Not a deal he was fine with. You know that'll just break your heart, he warned. A gentle, well-intentioned warning of a respectable man. But Roygun huffed gently, almost scoffing, smirking as she shook her head, and replied with a crack in her voice. Already broken. Again she was blanketed by the amenable heat of the hot water in her bathtub. Warm and cozy. A tiny swimming pool for herself. Her cocoon. A place for relaxation and self-care. A mediation of sorts, combined with a boost to recover her senses and peel away her fatigue before ultimately retreating to her bed. Hot baths were her mood elevator, or at least it used to be, until some years ago, when being alone no longer meant the same. Not with all the whispers or the voices, ghosts of her past mistakes unwilling to let her forget. Not that Roygun wanted to forget them in the first place. Those mistakes came with a heavy price, the loss of her ancestral home as well as most of her men. Lives lost for a petty reason. If she had yielded and swore fealty to the Baal, could things have changed then? Not really. Her location was closer to Baal's enemies. Swearing allegiance to him would only bring her the same result, only quicker. By the time their relief force could arrive, they would only come to see the ruins of her castle. Remaining neutral, and she would have to fight on two fronts. Siding with his enemies and the closer houses was the gamble she took, and it didn't pay off. When the Gremory marched to her with a force of 20,000 devils and lesser demons, Baal's main force had surrounded her allies' castle, besieging them and whittling them one by one, and she was left alone to fend the Gremory host. Not at all a fair fight, since Serzex simply created a giant hole in the wall and poured in his men to assault the castle, but she did her best. Her 5,000 men did their best. But the Gremory host was simply better and numerous. With a fleeting sigh, she whispered, "I promised to live for them. Wore their tragedies as my armor instead of shackles. Did my best to not dwell on guilt too much. But sometimes the best just don't cut it." She moved her head resting on the bathtub's headrest cushion, turning slightly to her left. Her green eyes found the human young man sitting on a stool, leaning his back against the wall behind him. Unlike her, he was fully clothed, and at the moment not looking back at her, or knowing that he was being stared at, just keeping his head up at the white ceiling and keeping his eyes shut. She wouldn't have minded if he took a peek. Devils had a high tolerance for these kinds of things, being comfortable with their body and whatnot, but she appreciated his gesture of politeness nonetheless. Maybe chivalry wasn't dead as people came to believe. She asked him to stay. He stayed. That was what she needed. "From my very limited time observing you, it appears you have quite the talent for this kind of stuff, Hayadu," she said with her usual, light-hearted and slightly flirtatious tone. "Tell me. What do you do when your best just won't cut it?" He took a deep breath, exhaling just as deeply. She knew this was a hard question. A bit unfair, even, considering he knew nothing and had just been bombarded with her tale of how House Spellpegger met their end, but she wanted to see if Azazel was right about the boy. If what he had done to Grayfia wasn't just luck, I'd accept it and move on, most likely. He opened his eyes, revealing the warm coffee browns of his, and looked into her eyes, not at all bothered that she was. "I tell myself some things just aren't meant to be, and that it'll pass. Don't know when, don't know how it's gonna pass, but it will." "So you're just assuming then?" "Sometimes hope is all that's left when everything's turned to shit," Roygun tittered. "Hope? Him?" She didn't expect that. "I've never been a big fan of faith, it's in my nature, see," but Issei shook his head. "It's not about religion. Personally, I think religion divides people. It's more about giving yourself something to hang on to." "Deluding yourself, you mean?" He shrugged. "Setting a destination, more like? Someplace you want to be that isn't where you are now. I shouldn't have called it hope, but most people do, so I kinda messed up there. Maybe because the word has a nice ring to it." She giggled. "Then what if that place just seems so far away regardless of everything? Take a break. Do something else. Anything to wind off. Sorta like a temporary stop before going back at it again. It's never a short road, is it? Even just sitting in a car can and will tire you out. And makes your legs feel like they've aged 100 years. He ended his sentence with a grumbling fitting for an old man. Roygun gave a simpered laugh. Men. So wise beyond your years, I see. Wise. I always worry about looking like a pompous ass when handing out impromptu life advice. Issei laughed quietly, finding humor in irony. I don't want to be that guy who took one lesson and suddenly figured everything out, offering expensive coaching sessions on social media. Or that chick who read a book and now give TED Talks all around the world. Feels a bit phony to me. So he was not immune to insecurities. So he was human, after all. Roygun smiled. But you aren't that kind of person, are you? She said with a titter. I've read your files. Sorry for peeking into your life, but that's just my job to check. Wow, stalking me, huh? Gee, Roygun shook her head. You have no social media, no Twitter, Instagram, or anything that connects you to people virtually, even though they're widely popular among your peers and even a generation above you. Mind if I ask why? I'm not comfortable enough to post anything related to me on the internet. That thing stays forever, you know. Sure, it's great for networking and promoting yourself in the market, but it's not like it's the only way. And I think I like to know people more by talking to them rather than stalking what they post, or what they are doing. Feels less cheaty, he air-quoted. Basically that stuff just isn't for me. I do have Line though, so that's not much different than text messages now, is it? Well, gotta keep in touch with my friends from time to time. Otherwise I'd be a hermit. Gun hummed. How deceptively mature of him. She wondered what he'd looked like during his teenage years, how that younger version of him would approach her dilemmas, and how naive he once sounded. If his pitch was much higher and louder like every other boy's, or tried to not speak much like every other boy who tried too hard to look cool. But they weren't half as interesting as the young man before her. You said you worry about being seen as a pompous prick. Do you care about what other people think of you? Other people? Nah. I don't give a damn about them. Just people who's around me. Friends and family and such. I'll just end up choking myself if I try to please everyone, so it seems. How mature. How very mature of him. What kind of events had shaped him into the young man she was currently talking to, she wondered. As Roygan was not one to pull punches, she asked him directly, were you always this well-kept, Haida? Tell me about your embarrassing past so I can feel better about myself being outwised by a boy of 20. Issei snrked? What? Do I need to have a sad, tragic, traumatizing past to justify my bestowing of my pretentious knowledge? Roygan laughed, and brought her body closer to the bathtub's edge, to lay her hands on the white rim and rest her head on top of them, and then to take a closer look on his expressions, which, so far, had been rather composed considering where they were and the birthday suit she wore. Humor me, she whispered, staring at his face, and caught his eyes moving from her long eyelashes, her cerise pink hair kept in a neat bun, her two devil horns, before settling to her eyes. He was not entirely immune to her bewitching appearance, it seemed. That's cute of him. Very youthful and very much of his age. Or are you saying your wisdom just fall into your head like a divine gift? Nah, course not. He waved his hand dismissively. What then? She prodded, then casting a meaningful grin. Perhaps a tragic tale of romance? Nah, no romance here. Never dated or interested in it. Really? Both her eyebrows raised themselves as her eyes broadened. That's unexpected. I thought for sure you would be a heartbreaker. Oh gods, no. I've seen dudes and dudettes from a breakup. They look like their entire family, and their pet dog just died and stayed like that for weeks and sometimes months, like they're just husks. As he laughed, Roygun's smile returned. So you're afraid of hurting others? Not that either. Another surprise yet again. I try to be careful. Most of the time. But I'm pretty sure I've hurt without intending to. It'd be nice if it never happens, obviously, but I'm not exactly a saint either. My, so very critical of yourself, the devil mused, growing more and more interested in the human without realizing it. Then do you think you're not good enough for a relationship yet? No. I'm just not interested in girls. So you're gay. No, not that either, Issei laughed. I like an asses just as much as the next guy. I dunno. Not really bothered to find that special one yet, or feel the urge to have a girlfriend for the sake of having one. I mean, I'm still 20, though with a killer face like this and my raw appeal, I can see why you're confused of my singleness. Roygun just burst into laughter. That line said with just the perfect amount of smug and poker face was a straight punch into her funny bones. Oh dear, she wiped a tear, slowly calming down though she still had the giggles. You're a funny guy, Haidu. Raw appeal, that was good. You find that funny. Your laugh wounded my pride and you find that funny. Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, Roygun looked at him, fully aware he was just joking around like the goblin he was. So no traumas then. I guess some people are just born perfect. Perfect? Nah, far from it. I was an addict once. That was the shocker so far. Oh, no, not drugs. Porn. Oh? Am I a lady who has fallen into the trap of a lecherous young man who has lured me into the bathroom alone? Nope. Oh. That stung my pride as a woman a little. Well, I never said I'm afraid of hurting anybody with cold hard facts. So it is. Roygun smiled again, nonetheless. It was a tight-lipped one, a bit tired, and hinted about her slowly evaporating drunkenness and her imminent hangover. What's your story then, Issei? How did you go over that addiction of yours? Or you still haven't? Issei didn't need to consider his answer. Nope. I can proudly say I no longer fap myself and risk severe right arm injury every night. Ah, is that so? Yep. Now I just do it once a week. His blank delivery hurled her into a snicker. Such a brave answer has no need to be ashamed about. Who says I'm ashamed? Issei replied. It's a pretty normal form of recreation, as long as you don't do it in front of others. Others who do mind. Then how did you overcome it? He made a face. Well, one night, it just happened. Sorta like an epiphany, you know? And right after I just came. Suffice to say, I got hit by post-nut clarity pretty damn hard. Evidently so, considering the wise young man you've become, Roygun agreed with a chuckle. Who would have thought out of all things, it would have been porn. Yep. But it was bad. Real bad. I think I was in my second year of high school. Yeah, pretty sure that was it. We've just finished the finals and we're on holiday, issei recalled. So anyway, there I was, in the middle of the night, laying on my bed, in hand, just staring at my ceiling while the girl and the guy in the video kept going at it, wondering what the am I doing with my life. And epiphanies arrive at the strangest moments. Well, good thing it arrived after. I'd probably just brush it off and continue wanking my life away. You can say that you've gained something from your loss. That's one way to put it, yeah? The two now shared a laugh, just reveling on how bizarre this topic would sound to strangers. It was still bizarre to the both of them. One moment she was sharing her issue and now they were talking about the enlightenment of a porn addict. Was it rough? Oh. Very, issei said, acting like a war veteran. The first week was the toughest, but I slept it off. Then I sold away all my magazines to my boys, got a bit of profit from that exchange, and wiped my computer clean from any temptations. She couldn't believe herself, but she was invented in this silly tale. And? Did you succeed? I gave up after a month. Ah. How sad. But at that point, issei continued, I've learned how to control myself better. How to partake in the nightly ritual without necessarily falling down into the same pit. After all, why not? It feels good and literally costs no money. True. Roygun would attest to that. Why bother herself with finding men when she knew her own body better than most? I see, thank you for sharing this interesting story of yours. Sure. No problem. I don't think you're whatever person you want to avoid, issei, she continued, eyes wandering into his that had the tiniest of smirk that disappeared the moment she spoke again. You didn't set out to become famous. You set out to help others. Experienced or not, you're a good man. Don't let that person you don't want to be ever force you into hiding. He looked a bit surprised, but his surprise turned into a smug smirk. Course I won't. Only me can change myself, and yet you've helped others to brave themselves to change. She wanted to say. Roygun wanted to say how appreciative she was for sparing his time, for declining her offer and yet staying with her without ever once bringing that up, for not leaving her despite the awkwardness that was sure to emerge, and for proving her wrong for never once making her feel that awkwardness. She wanted to say how impressed she was to him, but instead she kept it all in her head. Was it embarrassment that was causing her to do this? Perhaps. Which was strange. Roygun considered herself as someone who was frank and direct. Not whoever was controlling her at this moment in time. Welp, he suddenly said before she could say anything. You're not drunk anymore, I don't think. And you don't look glum anymore. I'll consider my job is done, and I'll send you the receipt for this counseling session first thing in the morning. Wait, don't leave. And to think this has been an act of goodwill, that's on you. I don't do things for free. He stood up with a yawn. What time was it now? Had to be past midnight by now, he thought. Good night, Roygun. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night. Roygun muttered, even though there was a large voice in her head, her own, shouting at her at how she would come to regret this in the future. But the door had said open and shut, and he had left. She submerged herself in the warm water, foregoing the fact that she didn't want to wet her hair earlier. But at this point, who cares? It took her a while to realize she could only think of him, and a bit longer to realize the voices weren't here anymore, at least until she started to think of them again. For all her failures and how they all died a meaningless death, and her struggles to give them an actual meaning, they died to keep their family safe, but their house had been ransacked and razed. Their wives likely taken by their enemies' men as part of the plunder, so they died not for their home, not for the family they left behind, and definitely not for her. She didn't want them to just die for her or accept it. The voices had returned. But this time, the whispers weren't the only thing scraping her mind. There was another voice. A young man's voice. A voice of a man that wanted to pull her out from the dark, to not be drowned by her guilt and wailing sorrow. Roygun emerged from the water, and headed straight outside without wiping her body or wrapping a towel around her. She left puddles of water that were becoming smaller and smaller with each of her steps, and as she opened her bathroom door, issei stood there, a hand hovering on the handle of a door leading outside. Whoa, hello there, he said with absent surprise and raised eyebrows, hazel eyes scanning over her curves, her now flattened hair sticking to her neck and shoulder, and not affected by the darkness of the room. I think you forgot something that rhymes with bowel. I forget nothing, she replied, walking towards him, leaving trails of water behind. Stay with me for the night. He quirked an eyebrow. With you looking like that? Now I know what I've said, but I'm no monk, Roygun. Boys like me still want to do things to you and your body. She didn't stop, stopping only when she was several inches away from his body, away from his heat, while the coldness of the night had slowly wrapped their uncaring fingers around her. Then do things to me. I thought we got over this part. She shook her head. Back then it was to run away from my problems. But you said something about taking a break, a stop, or the sorts. A distraction. Her pleading eyes looked up to him. I want you to be my distraction. Issei swallowed his spit. I don't want to hurt you. You won't. We don't know that. I don't care. I trust my instinct, she declared. I trust you, he sighed. Decline and it would be over for them. This bridge would forever be broken, never able to be repaired. Agree, and well, he'd have to live with the consequences which, at the time, didn't sound as threatening as the other. The choice was obvious to him. Roygun held her breath as he took his hand away from the door handle, and she breathed again, exhaling a wavering gasp the moment he moved closer to her, and spoke to her with a dastardly smirk. Lead the way. So she did. With a smile growing to a wide grin, she pulled his hand and took him back to her bathroom, back to the place where he smoothed some of her worries, mended parts of her already broken heart, drowned the voices with his own, and stole the devil's interest. Before long, she could only hear her sighs, ripped away from her as Issei fully intended to etch a permanent mark in her memory, and to fully enjoy himself in doing so. If this was a mistake, then at least that he'd make it the greatest mistake he ever made. The same applied for her. Mistake or not, she knew she wouldn't regret it, especially as he kept surprising and reaping gasps out of her lungs over and over again, as blemishes filled her neck, and she intended to make a man out of him. She didn't expect she might be made a woman. Within a few blinks, she knew mornings could be wonderful if it didn't come at the most inconvenient time of day. So very cruel and inconsiderate too. Inconsiderate because it barged in whether she set the alarm or not, and cruel since it carried the realization that Roygun had to go back to work and proceed with her semi-monotonous schedule, preferably saving lives or prolonging some, although this one felt oddly warmer. Like a bundle of warmth was lodged next to her. Ah yes, their earlier nightly escapades. Capita? Despite the lame play of words, she thought, a content smile tugged her nonetheless. That smile turned into a shallow smirk as she reached out a slender finger to poke one of his many cows, before retreating into a frown because of the stinging sensation on her rear end, not the afterglow she expected to have. Movies made the morning after all romantic and pleasant, never mentioning the part where her hips felt like it had been hit with a spanner. A trip to reflexology and perhaps a spa would be delightful when she had the time. Must this happen every time they do it? Then again, he wasn't exactly the gentlest, and she didn't complain at the time. Oh well, it is said regret comes after you come, something like that. Regret might be a bit too strong of a word, however. Regret implied she would have done it differently or not wanting to do it again if given the chance. Maybe it was the intimacy, or the feeling of someone else's warmth lying next to her. Something that left her wanting more of it. A drink she just couldn't get enough of. Groggily, Roygun grunted as she lifted herself to sit. Issei was sleeping still, his face and body facing the other end of the bed. He slept with his clothes on, she learned. She joked about it not being manly as he was putting them back on. He told her the cold doesn't give a shit if I'm manly or not, and neither would my professors. What an interesting boy he was. Sensible with a broad sense of humor, yet without the fragile masculinity often found in people his age. Now then, to appraise how he'd handle the aftermath for his decision. But she should save that after ridding herself from her daily obligations. She skimped over to the edge of her side of the bed. Not fully awake though not entirely asleep. The digital clock on her bedside table displayed a red 5. Her gray loose-fitting shirt hung below her shoulder blades, wrinkles here and there as she stood up and headed for the bathroom. It was Tuesday after all, and Tuesdays meant she had to arrive earlier than usual with the benefit of leaving earlier. That said, it didn't guarantee her to leave earlier. She knew better than to let her hope float, especially during busy times like these. Hope was a bit dangerous to have, she realized, as it could turn into copium instead. Yawning, her expressions were quick to turn as Roygun faced a mirror in the bathroom, and saw the myriads of red and blue splayed all over her neck. She leaned over and yanked the hem of her shirt down, and more hickeys were spotted. Oh, she muttered, waking up slightly more as she counted the blue-reddish blemishes on her skin. 3 on her neck and 5 scattered around her body, the front portion at least. Nothing a foundation couldn't hide, but these bruises made Roygun consider eating more iron-rich food. A scarf day it is. Summer was a few days away, but if anyone probed then she should get by with fashion as her reason, and so she continued her ritual. 15 minutes and a hot shower later, she was ready for work. A bit of jealousy nibbed her as she saw him still on her bed, showing no signs or will of getting up. She considered waking him up for the heck of it, throw in a few teases and pretend she did it out of affection, but she wasn't in the mood to be devious. Not yet anyway. As she stepped out of her door, she was greeted to the sound of crisp sizzling and the unmistakable aroma of frying sausages, as well as the sight of a fellow devil busying herself in the kitchenette, perfectly dressed in her sewn-made outfit. "You're up early," she greeted as she strutted down the living room. No hallways in this house, she remembered, which instantly made it feel bigger. "As are you," Grayfia replied as Roygun perched herself on a stool by the kitchen island behind the maid. "As one in the medical profession, I'd suggest you to get more rest. But I don't feel obliged saying that to someone who's making me food," she said, taking a peek at what Grayfia was cooking and why she had all the stoves occupied with pans or saucepan. "I see your shopping trip yesterday was fruitful. Did those gremlins ask you to stuff them up like royals?" Grayfia took a moment to reply. "They didn't." She then paused not more than a second before she took a pair of wooden tongs and plucked out the brown sausages off the frying pan, and onto a plate layered with tissue paper. Roygun had to swallow her spit as she recalled she didn't eat last night. "What about the clothes? They did get you clothes, right? And didn't just splurge all of it to fill the fridge?" "They did. They're not yet laundered," Grayfia replied humorlessly. Roygun's green eyes gazed down the blue ribbon on the maid's rear, wondering if there was some kind of rigging to keep the skirt part blooming like that. Either way, she'd be found dead before she ever considered putting those kinds of outfits on. "You know, I've always wondered how long it takes you to put all of those on. How many layers are those? 3? 4? 4. 5 if you include the headdress." Roygun made a face. "One she'd make if she found something to be excessive and troublesome. Just to be sure, you do have other clothes, right? Aside from the ones you got yesterday." "This puts me most at ease, I've found," confessed the devil, her back still against her, leaving Roygun to wonder what kind of expression she was making. "Does it bother you?" A sigh and a soft chuckle left her. "Different people, different methods of coping. Even if it does, don't let me stop you. Or anyone for that matter. Nobody's hurrying you, and if they do, ignore them." Grayfia responded with a silent, appreciative nod. Not a woman of many words was she. "By the by, did you hear any noises last night?" Grayfia finally turned around, her face faintly lined with alarm, positively thinking there was a burglar, and she failed to be alert. "I didn't." "Was there? It's nothing to worry about." "Never mind that," Roygun waved her off. Her spell worked properly then. She never thought she could be that loud and moany, but it was smart of her to prepare anyway. Sure would be nice if she could prepare that siege battle better. Maybe another line of defense or add a few more tactical retreats before they stood their ground at the keep. "Is there anything you want?" Roygun blinked. "I have to leave soon, but if you can put some of those sausages into a paper bag or something, that'd be very well appreciated." Smoothly, as though she'd done this before, Grayfia reached out to a cupboard and drew out a plastic food container. One nice pop later and several cuts with a knife, Roygun left for work with a very satisfied look on her face, and a nice warm breakfast in her bag. "Break, damn," a stunned issei aptly began his expression of amazement as he gulped down his boxed breakfast. "I feel like a school kid again. It's got veggies, rice, meat, side dishes and everything. And it's all free." "You bought and paid for this yesterday," Rainer blandly pointed out. "Well," Roygun did. "I'm still not wrong. Not one penny came out of my pockets. Let me be nostalgic in peace, alright?" Aha, Rainer rolled her eyes. She woke up an hour ago, but that didn't mean her energy to exchange remarks was fully charged yet, especially when she woke up a bit late and had to rush to get ready, only to learn their morning class was cancelled because the professor got sick when they were already in class. So now here they were, at the canteen, surrounded by mostly empty chairs and other university students on their laptops. Give her a few more hours and she would up her lip game to match his. Speaking of, her eyes narrowed at the noticeable red blemish on his skin. "Is that a hickey on your neck? Or you pinched yourself to look like you had one?" "Hickey?" Issei glanced down, realizing he couldn't see his neck and that was stupid of him to even try. "Oh. Right, because I'm the type of loser to do that." Her eyes widened slightly, and she paused her eating. She was expecting something more like a mosquito bite, or another silly answer, not this vague yet hintful reply. A rather unlikable feeling started to boil her. Felt like a hot rope tightening around her. "You mean you did it?" "I did." Issei nodded, guzzling down his last spoonful of rice. "Wow. Okay." Rainer blinked owlishly, certain that Issei didn't leave the house as she stayed up fairly late with him. "She went to her room earlier, however, last night?" "Yeah." He looked at her, feeling smug at her confusion but not wanting to gloat because he couldn't imagine liking someone who bragged about their capita. With Roygun, her eyes couldn't get any bigger even if she tried. That early unmistakable feeling of burning jealousy was immediately doused by a flood of surprise and amazement. You're ing with me. I'm pretty sure she wasn't you, I think. Rainier looked incredulous. You think? Hey, you have like powers and stuff, I dunno. There's gotta be a way to look like someone else. Some kind of potion or spells, like I would ever do that. Rainier shot back. You're not wrong about it though. Issei raised his eyebrows. Seriously? Rainier sighed, squeezing the bridge of her nose. Azazel told me about it, some dumb thing he said to probably cheer me up when I was being broody little twerp. Anyway, that doesn't matter. You did it with her? You know, I feel like I should feel insulted any time now. Well, yeah, but Roygun? She asked again, receiving a deadpan stare. How? Issei looked insulted. What do you mean how? With my raw appeal, of course. PBFT, well, ain't that charming? Rainier hacked and coughed as her own breath got stuck in her throat. Damn bastard and his stupid jokes. Look, it's not that she came on to me or the other way around, he explained coolly as he tidied his boxed lunch. She came home late, piss drunk, and I had to carry her to her room. At one point she sobered up enough, said something she may or may not want to let out, and asked me to stay around and listen to her talk about her past. Hearing that, Rainier let out a softer sigh than before. An understanding one, if Issei had to guess. Somewhat sagacious too, which made him a bit worried. It was like she knew something he didn't. Oh, yeah, Issei exhaled. But before you assume stuff, I never took advantage of her or anything, alright? That's beyond me. Ask her if you don't believe me. It's fine, I believe you, Rainier snickered. She never saw him being this defensive before. Roygun would have kicked your ass if you did anyway, but either way, it's kinda impressive that you nailed her some days after you met her. I mean, she's Roygun. She's miles beyond my league. I know. That's what I meant. He gave her a stink eye. You weren't supposed to agree to that. She's a working adult while you're just a college kid, Rainier shrugged. Was she your first? No, her eyes broadened again, this time wider. He answered her question before it was even processed in her brain. My first was with a hooker. Whoa, wait, what? I know. I wasn't always this perfect, he sighed melancholically, garnering zero sympathy. I was every bit a horny boy addicted to porn. It's a really inspiring story of change and commitment, and I'd love to tell you more about the turning point of my life, but here comes Matsu. What the, you're finished already? The once baldy boy now turned university jock with masculine buzz cut and build invaded the empty seat next to him. A tray with steaming hot noodles was placed before him. He was Matsuda, one of Issei's partners in crime and high school classmate, and now a fellow uni classmate. Physically, he was significantly more buff than he was in high school. Not to the point that he'd be seen as a gym rat. Somewhere 2-3 levels of dedication below that. The most prominent change of him, however, was his hairstyle. He actually had actual black hair and no longer reminded people of a worn-out baseball. He even sported a fade and was rather well known as a member of the soccer team with a few admirers. Issei recalled Motohama got pettily jealous for a while, even confessing he felt inferior to their now fairly popular friend. Certainly didn't help that Matsuda had a gloating period, but even then they knew he was just messing with them. Took Motohama a fair bit, but the glassed boy got over it. Despite all that, the glassed idiot was still the first out of the trio to get an actual girlfriend, and her out of all people. Well duh, Issei yapped, smirking mockingly, you'd beg if I don't. What the hell, man? Matsuda fumed, looking betrayed. I thought we were friends. Your food looked like real gourmet shit. It was gourmet shit, Issei replied pointedly, scummily and unapologetically bragging. Until he noticed the 3 pieces of sliced red meat, soaking in the steaming soup. Hang on, is that pork? Where'd you get that? New menu from Aya's. And off. It's mine and I need protein. What if it's me who asked for one? Matsuda gave her a thin smile. Not even you. I don't share my food. Then he began his feast, displaying his friends his weird talent of being able to stuff hot food in his mouth without letting it rest. Rainier rested her chin atop her palm, and said with a flat tone and equally flat look, what if I let you cop a feel? Matsuda promptly paused. The ramen noodles were lifted and were in and on his mouth as he stared at her, who gave him a cheeky smirk and raised both her eyebrows. Calmly, Matsuda chewed and swallowed his food, and rested the wooden chopsticks onto a napkin. He drank his cold drink, clapped his hands like he was in a meeting, and stared at her with a monk-like gaze. Yuma-san. You should value yourself more than a mere slab of pig meat. At least ask for 2. Issei wheezed as Rainier smiled stiffly, loudly muttering asshole. Go bald already? Break. So. Who's the lucky guy? Or gal? Or both? Perhaps. Apparently her cover-up wasn't as effective as she'd hoped. Of course these winged freaks would instantly notice the telltale signs of someone who just had an intense night, and being the yearly liberated specimen they were, none of them bothered with being subtle with it. Sure, there were cases of oddities like Barakiel and his wife, but that was extremely rare from them. Roygun suspected they overused the words "as long as there is a hole." Kelwarner and Donasek, especially, held nothing back as they invaded her table in the cafeteria. So much for the scarf. Zero respect for privacy, have you? Roygun chuckled lightly as she shook her head, bemused. We don't have that here, replied Donasek offhandedly. True enough. Roygun knew there was an entire floor dedicated for these workers to relieve their stress as a group activity. Well, until they had it converted into another hospital. But Azazel gave them a longer break time so they could always visit one of the many hotels for a quick trip. I understand you're reserved. Anyone is reserved compared to the lot of you, Roygun cut Kelwarner's sentence. A smirk on her face. Which isn't false, Kelwarner nodded, so we won't pry too much into it. But the least you could do is give us a name, and we won't ever bother you again. For a week, Roygun raised an eyebrow. A week. Well, you're the only devil around here, Donasek added, speaking as if he was a negotiator seeking compromise with a disinterested client. We're curious about how devilish they may be inside a bedroom. We had a bet, you see, and Kelwarner would be someone who wanted to get the deal sealed without bullshitting her way into it. About who you'll sleep with. Roygun's eyes widened and blinked. You what? It's a tradition, Donasek explained with a shrug. We do it every time we get a new employee, and to be clear, there's a lot in the pot. I'm not sure if I'm happy with the prospect of my body becoming a gambling object, at least not without me profiting from it. Both of the fallen angels had a wide grin on their faces. Duh, there's the devil. We'll hand you a quarter of it. That's around $500,000 in USD? A mil? Roygun snapped. How many of you took part in this? Suddenly, everyone in the cafeteria raised their hands, furthering her disbelief. Even Azazel, and Penemu. She had to shake her head again. My, there's no shame in this office. Shame is too constricting for people like us, Kelwarner said, smiling as everyone put their hand down. Not that we mind being constricted, just the physical kind. Evidently so, Roygun snickered. If only the devils were equally as horny, then perhaps there would be a better way to end the war. Very well then. Considering this had gone more ridiculous beyond her expectations, she supposed she could humor these murder of starved ravens. Not that she was ever bothered by their nosiness, she was a devil, she supposed. These things didn't really bother her as much as it would to humans. So what is the bet about? The specific terms, I suppose. Oh, it's simple, Kelwarner said. Man or woman, and if it happens to be both, or both, Donasek added. It's a three-way bet. And if it was with someone from this workspace, then they'll get a raise. Assuming you are the one making the advances, of course. It's been months since you worked here, Roygun. We thought this be over within a week. Is that so? I apologize if I'm not as usually frustrated as you might think. She raised both her brows, and tried to look for Azazel, wondering how many employees had their salaries raised this way. But that doesn't appear to be the case, Kelwarner continued, because by now they would be bragging about it. I know I would. I know he wouldn't keep quiet either. Donasek raised his hands in a Gaelic sign of admittance. I see, Roygun muttered. Did Raynor know anything about this? Well, I won't say their name as this may concern them should they know, but it's a he. For a split second, Donasek had the widest grin while Kelwarner slumped to her seat. Cheers erupted just as disheartened groans seeped into the air. It was as if she was accepting a proposal, or as if it was her birthday. Men and women cheered and congratulated others, as if a moment of reprieve after hours upon hours of steel clashing. The epic celebration, as if to say those hard days were worth it for this moment alone, that the deaths they suffered weren't in vain. And, hey, you good? You're all frozen. Definitely didn't look like someone who just won $500,000, asked Kelwarner with a hint of concern in her face and voice. You're not angry, are you? This is a fallen angel thing, but seeing you're a devil yourself, we just sorta assumed you won't mind. You don't have to force yourself to be considerate if you don't want to. We can handle it. We're assholes, Roygun snapped out from the screams. HM? Yeah. I'm fine. Just overwhelmed, is all you know. Never expected anyone to be that. She glanced around. Laughter's all over with winners probing the losers with jibes. Explosive. It helps lift everyone's spirits, Kelwarner chuckled, easing back to her seat. Now alone with her since Donasek already stormed off to collect his winnings, Any form of dopamine injections are accepted no matter how stupid or silly its cause is. Yes, of course. I'm not angry or anything, just surprised. Roygun twirled a playful smile. I should join in on the fun next time. Why, yes. Yes, you should. The more the merrier. A question, though, should there ever be a human working here, someone like Freed, do you approach them the same way? Calawarner let out a hearty laugh. Freed? Someone like Freed wouldn't waste a second to tell everyone about his accomplishment. But you mean the normal kind of people, yes? People with vanilla taste, let's say? Then of course we don't do this kind of thing with a human. Or talk about it as openly as we would to each other. Of course. We corrupt them first. Then we ask? There's a certain order of things, you see, but of course. Roygun's smile waned. She thought of these cretins a bit too highly, it seemed. Grayfia was brave. She fought bravely. The prospect of death never fazed her or deterred her fighting ability. She controlled her ice magic with pinpoint precision, avoiding her allies while striking down her foes. In the battlefield, the Lucifuge was a force to be reckoned with, and she was no exception. So very few that she couldn't take down on her own. Until today, the cooking was done. Her duty as a housekeeper was finished. The floors had been swept and mopped, the carpets vacuumed, the clothes dried and laundered, the beds made, though it was her own bed since the rest did their own. With nothing to keep her mind busy, however, she realized there existed an enemy she couldn't take on her own. Impervious to both magic and physical harm, guilt, regret. Those sorts of baleful things. The nasty reminder that nothing she did could change her past or kill these illing feelings. What she didn't understand was how harder, she supposed, it was to be unaffected by it. When her parents were executed, she felt she handled her grief better than now. Then she realized because at that time she had her brother. She drove herself to be strong for his sake and let him grieve as long and deep as he wished. And when she received the letters of his demise at that time, she was already with the Gremory. There was grief, for sure, a lingering sadness that lasted for several weeks, but nothing that ever affected her work. In fact, she felt relief that her brother no longer had to live in servitude of others. Death, to many devils, was a mercy, after all, now that she lost everything, sitting in an empty room, facing her own reflection from the black screen of the TV, left with no battles to fight, no duties needing her attention. She realized that she was missing someone for her to be strong for. A reason, she supposed, was the better way to put it. She despised feeling worthless. But she couldn't help but feel that way when she couldn't think of anything that would make her someone deserving to be alive more than those who died that day. Then earn it, she remembered Issei's words. Earn it, but how? What was there to do to make her, if even for just a tiny bit more, deserving of her life being spared instead of any of the Gremorys? How could she earn it? Or at least be at peace with the fact that she was alive? Or stop asking herself whether it was right to eat, to live, to draw a breath when they couldn't? If it was all right to feel fine when the people close to her had died? There was no logical line to be drawn here. Or if it was a problem logic could solve to begin with. First in a somber mood, now Grayfia was nothing but confused, left wondering about what she could do for the Gremory. The obvious one, for her, was to take vengeance, go back to hell and aim for Baal's head. She attempted that during her first day being here. Completely in the spur of the moment. Now that her mind was substantially clearer, she understood it would likely end with her death rather than anything. Baal had an army and spies scattered all over. She should instead be ready for the chance of him desiring to tie loose ends. Her pondering ended as she felt a presence. Both holy and unholy, one mixed as one, the telltale sign of a fallen angel. It felt like a gentle brush of a warm breeze, warmth from the holiness they carried. The hotter, usually the stronger. Her steely gray eyes diverted to the entrance as the door swung open, and one of the two youths announced their arrival. We're home, said Issei, lazily. A habit his mother had ingrained upon him. So she knew he wasn't a thief, she reasoned. Fair enough. Issei would rather not get beaten with a frying pan or other sorts of improvised weaponry she could gather from the kitchen. Grayfia promptly left her seat, welcoming the two with professional formality as they went past her. Welcome back, she said with a polite bow. Hey Grayfia, you're still in that dress? Asked Rainier. And for a moment, a flash of concern darted across the maid's face. You don't feel stuffy in it? Not at all. But you can't pull that off, Issei intruded, moving on to his room to change. Nice try, Rainier huffed, also walking towards her room. I'm not fulfilling your weird male fantasy. Not for free, you mean? Rainier thought for a moment. If it was easy money, then depends on how much. And the two shut their door, each with a snooty smirk on their face. Issei was the first to re-emerge as he didn't have and therefore did not need to deal with sweaty under. He sauntered to the kitchen, eager to snack, hoping for some leftover sausages. Anything, really, to stuff his mouth with. His eyes gleamed with glee as he found them on the dinner table, taking a plate of 4 to be reheated. Unbeknownst to him, Grayfia had been following him and was standing by the open entry to the kitchen. Always on standby in case of any new orders. I can cook more if you like. Nah, thanks. These will do, Issei replied as the square white appliance beeped before humming. They taste great. They're the same stuff we bought yesterday, right? Yes, they were. Huh. I don't remember them tasting like that, they're never that sweet. What did you add to them? I glazed them with honey mixed with mustard and rosemary. Dang, they're honestly amazing. You gotta teach me how to make it one of these days, she bowed politely. I'd be glad to. Stiff as ever, eh? This felt like there was a helper in the house instead of another occupant. And the way she stood with her hands clasped in front of her didn't help either, even more so with her maid outfit. Why was she wearing that again? Just as he was about to ask, Grayfia asked him first. May I ask you a question? You just did, his smartass brain thought. Sure. You didn't have to ask for that. Just ask. She duly nodded as if that was a command from him. Her stoic face began to melt, however, into one someone would make when they weren't sure of themselves. Some days ago when you told me to earn it. Yeah. Knowing this would be a heavy topic, Issei straightened himself both physically and mentally as he folded his arms. In what way do I earn it? Now that was a difficult question. One he had to work the gears in his head for a few seconds. That depends, I guess. Depends on the person you want to live for, if you get me. But it's still too broad even with that. He scratched his chin, feeling his jawbone. He imagined being in Grayfia's position, and wondered how he'd tackle the problems. The people you cared about. The Gremory. You said they treated you well, right? Better than they have to. Then would it be wrong to think they would wish you to not be unhappy? Her gray eyes broadened slightly. I couldn't speak for them, but I'd imagine so. Well then you can start out with that. By being not unhappy. It'll feel strange because you're grieving for them. How is it okay to feel fine when they're not here? Isn't it disrespectful to feel anything other than sad? Yes. That was exactly how I felt, Grayfia said, surprised at how surprised she was. Those sorts of questions and contradicting feelings are normal. I think that's just how it is. Some kind of a reminder to yourself that the ones you lost are that impactful to you. But I see that while it's important to keep in mind, it's also important to allow yourself to feel other things too. I dunno, like snippets of happiness. Maybe you like cooking and feel somewhat happy while doing it, or you caught yourself laughing at something, so and so. Those moments can be like some kind of tribute for them. I think it's better than instead of just boxing yourself in guilt whenever you don't feel sad. Issei went silent to study her expression. At the moment they were both thoughtful. I see, she finally whispered. Her formed a small, hard-to-notice smile, as though she realized she was making her first steps to make peace with her loss. Thank you? Sure. Thank you too. This time she looked confused. What for? For asking me, he said with a light shrug, peeking at the timer on the microwave. She let out a voice. Indeed, this wasn't a topic easy to ask. She even thought and mulled about whether or not she should ask him. It made her feel vulnerable, in a way, because she was exposing her trouble and therefore part of herself. But in the end, it didn't feel like a mistake. You're an astonishing person, Haidu, Grayfia muttered, much to his surprise. To first give such an answer and then acknowledge the effort that went behind the question. You're younger than me and yet your understanding is very impressive. I watch too many movies and think way too much, is all. Issei would claim he was someone immune from feeling embarrassed. But then again, he was not someone to get heaps of praises to begin with. Most were backhanded anyway, and especially not one this genuine and from a straightforward adult. So he dealt with it with the only way he knew. Move the topic along. So, anything else you wanted to ask? Nothing else. That's all, she shook her head. Her smile had already left her, but there was a small change in her expression as it wasn't as stiff as it was earlier. Then they heard a door key followed with Rainer's rapid steps. The two turned around to see her face full of concern and gloom. I got a call from Azazel, she began, staring only at Grayfia. She was smiling, but Issei could easily tell that was a forced half-smile. He said they found another devil by the coast. It's Rias Gremory. Immediately Issei averted his eyes from the fallen angel to the devil, and managed just in time to see her take in a deep breath, her swelling from relief, disbelief and befuddling joy. But the way Rainer clutched her elbow and looked away in unease prevented her from feeling completely relieved. There's no easy way to say this, so I can only say it straight. She's blind, Grayfia. I'm sorry. Oh come on, give her a break, issei sighed. It pained him to see someone's snippet of happiness being yanked away that quickly. So unfair, yet nothing could be done about it. Since I was little, I've always dreamed to be here, muttered Rias as her left eye was kept open by two gloved fingers. The black pupil surrounded by her blue-green eyes didn't shift no matter how many times Roygun waved the flashlight in her hand. No good. Roygun shook her head as she glanced over to Azazel, who then hung his head low in response. The lack of other sound confirmed her fear, and Rias felt her tears began to well. They caused her voice to hitch, but she forced herself to smile despite her shakiness. A Gremory must be as tough as they are kind, because one without the other meant nothing. I just wish it didn't have to be like this. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the DanzyDanz for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.